Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if issei got harem with DXD Goddess Part 1. Before I start, please do support for more awesome content, and subscribe my channel and like this video. If you like to hear adult version of this and other stories, I'll give you link of my Patreon. Go support and follow the Silver W. King for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story. Link in the description. Let's start this video. The first time Michael met his brother, the last Archangel, he found him in his father's throne chasing his wings. The sight was so unexpected that he forgot to address his father upon his personal realm. Ah, Michael, just in time. Come meet your youngest brother before I introduce him to everyone else. Right. Michael shoot himself from his startle. Of course. Oh, he discovered flying. And he's still chasing his wings. His name is Regel. Michael blinked at the name and its meaning, wondering if a certain animal inspired father in his latest creation. Ah, Michael made a noise, and his mind as well. Of course, father. Michael gave a bow, realizing his brother was simply excitable, but he should teach him to act more disciplined in father's presence. The creator chuckled, before he called to his flying newborn. Regel, come me your brother. Yes, father. Michael expected Regel to act as Gabriel did when they first met, with her immediately hugging him with love and joy. Upon landing in front of them, and actually looking at Michael, Regel stopped, stunned. Michael tilted his head at the reaction. Were his own might scaring his little brother? No, in the Creator's realm, no one is to feel harm or fear of others, as his might would engulf all. Regel looked toward father, then back at Michael. He repeated the action a few times, before finally speaking. He stopped, and cleared his throat. It should have been impossible for something to get caught in his throat, given he was one of father's perfect creations. I mean. Hello, brother. Oh. Michael found himself smiling at Regel's actions. A shy Archangel. It's nice to meet you too, brother. Michael took the initiative and hugged his youngest brother. While I wish it was in better times, I truly am glad to meet you. Michael pulled back. Regel breathed hitched, before look back at father, and then trying to act casual. Which was odd, as that was a human action. Meeting Regel was proving to be a novel experience. While Michael was sure his brother would grow out of this phase, he would treasure the memory of this adorable meeting. Be better time? Regel asked. Yes, with the great war engulfing the world, I'm afraid I don't have time to take you across the fields of heaven, and have you meet all our brothers and sisters. But I will be there with you every step of the way, while we battle the evils who rebel, and the wicked who disparage against father's words. Michael said, comforting his sibling. To see. Regel paled, before looking at father once more. Michael found the reaction odd. Did his brother maybe not want to battle in father's name? No, the thought itself was ludicrous. Yes, my child. God said in an understanding tone with a hint of sadness. I know. Michael was treated to the odd reaction of worry, then relief on his youngest brother's face. Michael, gather your siblings. The Creator didn't need to elaborate which ones. And wait in the 6th layer. I have a few things to speak with Regel about. Right away, father, you're going to die. Right after the Archangel Michael had well and truly left, these words were uttered. It was probably not the best way to start one's second conversation with God. I know, while Regel was taken aback. You know, of course he, or should it be she, chuckled. A sound like pure contentment and happiness filled the realm. It was more like a concept than a physical description of sound. Why do you think I chose you and remade into one of my archangels? Regel felt joy, just from God being happy, but the knowledge of what's to come crashed that down right away. But the reincarnated archangel felt lost for words. But then why? Why not do things differently? Some roads must be walked through, even if you know what awaits you at the end. YHWH said with the patience of every kind parent. But that's not then why did you make me? Regel couldn't help but shout, his voice echoing within the throne. Because while the future you know may contain peace and the world would have its guardians, humanity and heaven itself will be lesser for it. Regel's outburst wasn't even worth mentioning. I made you to balance the scales, Regel. To aid them be as good as I love and believe them to be, them. Mankind and the angels. Regel cried at the faith his Creator had in him, and his eventual death. Then he felt his throat was dry, even if it physically wasn't, from understanding the responsibility placed on him. Can't Regel pause to gather his courage, even if it felt like the whining of a petulant child? Can't you do that while being there with me? The God of the Bible gave a sad smile. The throne was a tad less bright for it. Come with me, Regel. He began to float away, and Regel instinctively flew after him. Where are we going? YHWH looked back and patted Regel's head. I'm going to show you the Emperor Beast of Apocalypse. Regel knew what fear was. He knew that lump of cold water that began in your gut, and then went up to before spreading out to the rest of your body through your nerves, while feeling like iced electric shock. Regel stood in front of an endless wall of pure luminosity that seemed to extend it infinitely in all sides. The divine magic barrier was so bright that the only color that could be attributed to it would be whiter than white. And yet Regel could still see the beast clear as day, just as it could see him. If fear, as Regel understood as a human, was a lump of cold water in one's stomach, what he felt now was like being punched and submerged straight into that frozen sea and slammed into its ocean floor. The 7 heads would smash into the divine wall repeatedly, over and over again, shouting, roaring, screaming, exploding into pools of blood, only for a whole new beast to be born from the pool and attack the divine wall. Attack the wall, attack itself, merge with itself, grow stronger, and repeat the process again and again and again and again. It was a new dimension of fear Regel wished he had never knew about, or ever even envisioned to have existed. He could only stare at the beast and know the inevitable. His coming death and the annihilation of everyone and everything, over and over and over. What do you think it is? Yet, just as Regel's thoughts began to spiral to despair's oblivion, God's voice swept all that fear away, with assurance of their light and love, like a bad dream. Regel blinked a few times, finding himself able to think and focus again. God gestured with his head. Death, Regel said, the first thought in his mind. Destruction incarnate. Just looking at the beast without the fear made Regel see not just how pure evil it was, but how disturbing and disgusting it looked as well. Savagery and violence given form. The Creator chuckled. Good guess, but no, Regel shouted in exaggerated form, to which God found amusing. Which do you think came first, the Great Red or mankind dreaming it into existence? God looked back at the beast without a care, as he began adjusting a few things upon the barrier. Regel tilted his head at the non sequitur. Has Great Red's existence caused the world and thus all manner of beings in it to be created, so they could dream and add to its existence? Or has all living beings' dreams solidified into creating it? God looked back to Regel. Chicken or the egg? Regel held his chin and closed his eyes and thought. Given that the dimensional gap is atemporal, if it was born there, I think only you would know. He opened his eyes in answer, before a thought came to him, causing his eyes to widen. Or is it both? Good job. Regel preened under the praise, almost forgetting the beast was close by. Given that hint then, what do you think this thing embodies? Regel crossed his arms and pouted in deep thought. Death was the first thought that came to him, before he dismissed it. That was his first answer, but it wasn't that. Savagery? That didn't seem right either. Savagery as a concept seemed too small, or rather not big enough, to explain the beast. Destruction? That didn't seem right either. Regel felt he might be too focused on stuff that were in your face bad. His thoughts kept cycling into many similar concepts. Annihilation, disaster, decay, corruption, or just plain evil. But those concepts felt too small, too vague, too childish, or too obvious. What if it is the obvious answer? Is it evil? Regel asked, while jumping up and down. Or rather floating up and down. It can be mistaken as such, but not necessarily. Then Regel thought about it some more, then shrugged. I dunno. Could you please tell me, Father? Of course, my son. YHWH smiled and explained. Look at that over there. At that cluster there. God pointed, and Regel followed along, finding his sight showing things much further than he thought. Then again, he's a newborn just discovering everything he can do with this new body now. Far deep in the planes of flesh being destroyed and remade, where parts of the beast's body was chaos of birth and death or monster took place, Regel saw a single isolated spot with a person in it. That's a child. The Archangel shouted and moved to act. No, Regel. His father placed a hand on his shoulder, then Regel felt God's power suffuse his being, empowering him. Truly look and feel. Regel calmed down and focused, knowing his father would never misguide him. Looking not just at the physical realm in front of him, but the spiritual, and feeling it with God's sensing, Regel flinched back. He could see a cord, about an atom wide, connecting the beast to the child. More than that, he could feel what the child truly was on a magical level. It was still the beast, or a part of it. It had its own emotions, innocence, terror, despair, but those were surface emotions. They weren't real, more like pretend emotions. The child was besieged on all sides by serpentine heads, grinning at the child, who flinched back. The child turned its head and stared directly at Regel. The Archangel flinched back. The child cried out a plea in fear and hope, in words that belonged to no language that exists. Like it hadn't learned what words or language were yet, but God showed Regel the truth within. The emotions of mockery and glee under the surface emotions. The serpentine heads lunged at the child, tearing it to pieces, one bit at a time, as the human child facsimile screamed. It almost seemed like the monster heads wanted to prolong the figure's death but didn't have the patience for it. The child body was gone. One of the heads roared in satisfaction, the rest overwhelmed with screams of frustration. Then the vision was gone, and Regel could only look at the part of the beast in front of him behind the barrier. The beast was still attacking the barrier, never a pause. Yet Regel could swear he could see relishment in one of its many eyes at his inner anguish. Why? Regel paused, gathering his strength to speak. Why would it do that? What's the point? God looked at his son with a somber look. Regel began to suspect the answer, but didn't want to voice it. It should be wrong. It has to be wrong. A being like that shouldn't exist. It's too cruel for it to exist, because it is the embodiment of suffering. Yet the truth didn't change his wishes. Regel grew quiet. He took in this information, reviewing everything he knew about high school DxD, thinking about the future and what this new information add to it, but looked back to his father, his resolve slowly building. In the future, he struggled with the proper, polite word for what he wanted to say. You can say canon timeline, God said with mirth, easing his son's struggle. In the canon timeline, Regel nodded. The beast being released from its seal wanted to just destroy the world. It wanted to destroy anyone with power. Any of those that could protect any who are weak or innocent. Anything and anyone who could fight, who even has the will. Then God looked back at the beast in glare. The barrier shined somehow more, and burned all the monster's body, reducing it to its mere cores. A moment later, the beast returned, but seemed lesser somehow. And then it would have remade the world in a design similar to that of the Allied master computer. The who? Regel looked confused. I have no mouth, and I must scream. Regel's eyes widened in horror, and he instantly understood what was being referenced. Oh, quite. God turned to leave and Regel followed. Okay, Regel said, mostly to himself. He stood next to his father, rather than behind him. Having done so instinctively to be closer to his father's protection and away from the beast. God patted his head. Okay. He repeated, psyching himself up. All right, what's the plan? What do we need to do? Regel looked back at his father, leaning into his hand. He threw a couple of punches forward, like he's shadow boxing. How do we win? It requires a bit of work. God removed his hand. Regel pouted but kept quiet. YHWH twitched, holding back a laugh, and returned his hand again, making Regel instinctive smile. All along the space around them was moving in unimaginable speeds as they headed back to heaven. Endless Shaonin firepower won't be enough, neither will the powers of love and friendship. What do we need? Regel jumped to ask. We need to reduce it. To lessen the beast, from a great evil, or even a challenge, into a stepping stone for mankind. I don't get it. Regel frowned as he was lost. God chuckled. You are young. You'll understand with time and experience. Okay. Regel nodded with a happy grin. For a little while, the two traveled in silence. Where were we, by the way? Regel asked. The end of the world. The Creator replied. Okay. Regel pouted at that answer. I know that's what the light novel said, But what does that actually mean? We were at the edge of the universe. I stopped the beast from entering, and then trapped in a cage that grows in strength, the more it attempts to pierce into this reality. God casually explained. Holy shit. Regel was gobsmacked. Then he looked around, finally noticing they were passing stars and galaxies along the way. Guess I was so nervous about seeing the apocalypse beast I didn't notice. Then again, the teleportation spell barely took a few minutes. So, no one can actually get here, right? Technically people can find this place by heading to the end of the world. However, as humanity progresses and maps the globe, that concept will cease to be functional, and thus the path to the beast's cage will stop existing as well. However, since I tied the beast and its cage to the concept of the end of the world, when that idea ceases, so will the caged beast from the physical realm. Wait, it will stop existing? Regel cried out at this new information. Yes and no. It will no longer physically exist, but it will continue on in the realm of forgotten dreams. A section of the dream realm equivalent to the dimensional gap. God explained. Sadly, as you know, it would still be possible to reach it with the right tools. Hopefully I'll make the seals even more difficult to break this time. God OP, please. Regel took a glance back from where they came. Never nerf. Ha 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 ha, you still have much to learn, young Padawan. The creator's laughter was a single eternal moment of ringing joy. Regel grinned, then after a moment, realized what his father just said. Wait, you know Star Wars, omniscience, my boy. You still have much to learn, but I have faith that in time you'll get good. Now, let's go meet your Archangel brothers and sisters. Did you seriously just use the words get good? Regel exclaimed. God smiled mysteriously. Gabriel was ashamed to admit, to herself and to anyone who would ask her later on, that her expectation of her father's last Archangel may have colored her opinion of Regel before she ever met him. Hello everyone. Regel waved his arm above his head cheerfully, once father introduced him. Let's work together to save mankind. Unlike Regel's enthusiastic greeting, he was met with silence. It was only for a moment, before Michael took in the reign of the situation. Yes, Regel, we are happy to meet you too. Let me introduce you to everyone. Michael smiled back, and began doing as he said. These here are Metatron, Sandalphon, Serial, Remiel. Gabriel, a voice spoke next to the strongest woman in heaven. Gabriel looked to her side to see the untouched seraph, labeled so for having never sustaining a single injury all the length of the Great War. Raziel. Gabriel nodded. You noticed it too? Raziel said. Yes. Gabriel replied. The reason why Regel was first met with silence wasn't due to how he looked or his attitude, but rather his power, or rather how weak he is. Father had spent quite a long time creating him. Raziel commented. What all the seraph had noticed about Regel right away, with their angelic sight, especially within the sixth heaven adding to this senses, was his wings. A single pair. A set of wings weren't some functional limb. Angels don't need them to fly. Rather, an angel's wings were a measure of their power, how much holy light they can channel from their connection to Father and his throne. For Regel to be made with only a single set was odd. From sight alone, one could mistake him for a simple angel. It's only the present seraph's power and senses that let them see Regel's true self as an archangel, just like the current 9, or correction 10, seraphs. While Regel felt as strong as the strongest six-winged angels, it was a vast gap between him and any of the seraphs. It is likely that his growth would be his strength, or maybe Father made him strictly for an administrative role. Gabriel reasoned, with how the war is going, and that other issue Father constantly needs to attend to. One could see the raised eyebrow in Raziel's voice. Father makes no mistakes, Gabriel said with certainty. Raziel said nothing. Back with Regel surrounded by his brothers, Uriel was laughing as he lightly hit his youngest brother's back. Ha 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 ha, Father, you're small. Father, can I take him to the paradise fields so he can get something to eat? Uriel said boisterously. Uriel was a giant of an angel. Raziel had often heard her other siblings wondering what he would look like with a beard. Brother, please take it easy on him. He's just a newborn. Raphael chastised. Are you feeling well, Regel? Uriel sometimes forgets his strength. Raphael was oddly enough usually seen alongside Uriel, even though he's the Archangel of healing and is known for his water magic. I felt my spine was gonna break. Regel wheezed out. And finally, Michael continued, gesturing to the last two archangels, who stepped forward. These are your sisters, Raziel and Gabriel. Hello, Regel greeted, only stumbling for a moment upon seeing Gabriel's beauty. Hello, little brother. I hope together we can spread Father's mercy to the world so it would finally have peace. Gabriel said, connecting to Regel's earlier sentiment of saving humanity. I am Raziel, brother, and I hope we get the chance to spend time and talk together. Raziel nodded. Now my children, Father spoke and all listened. As you can see, Regel is young, so please be an example to him, and teach him about your duties so he may learn to fulfill his own. He is going to be following and working with all of you on your various missions. While carrying out your missions for the war, you may teach and guide Regel, yet ultimately how he chooses to operate in those missions are up to him, as long as it doesn't cause harm to other angels or innocent humans. Yes, Father. While the present archangels replied in agreement without hesitation, they still couldn't help but feel surprised at how free Regel was allowed to operate. Now, Raziel, I believe you have intel gathering mission in the British Isles. Make your preparations and take Regel with you. Father spoke. Raziel blinked, surprised being given responsibility of his youngest brother so soon. I know time is somewhat of the essence for your trip, so just teach Regel the basics of combat. That would be enough. As you will, Father. Raziel turned to Regel and smiled. Looks like we get to spend time faster than I thought. Looks like it, Regel grinned. He then blinked and turned to Father, as he remembered something. Father, what, time is it? The archangels looked at Regel in confusion. Late 5th century. Ah, got it, thank you. Regel smiled again. The archangels were lost at this exchange, but understood that Father's all-knowing, and understood the intent of Regel's question. By your will, Father. Raziel bowed her head, and Regel copied her. She suddenly raised her head in haste, giving Father a surprised look before turning and leaving. Gabriel had felt that Father then sent a telepathic message to her younger sister, but didn't dare peek into what it was. Father, Michael spoke after the two left. I wish to ask for your knowledge what is Regel's role. It was something that their creator never elaborated upon. Michael hadn't asked for need of knowledge. If God didn't want to tell them, then they wouldn't dare question him, but rather wanted to avoid confusion or have any of Archangel's duties clash with Regel's. You will understand his role as you come to observe him. His duty, however, is something that will be carried out once the Great War is finally over. With that grim reminder, God and his archangels return to their plans and next moves against the enemy factions. In the Isles of Britain there lives a blacksmith of great skill who created many powerful magical swords. No one knows who they are, only the latest rumors from a batch of failed magic swords pointed to their latest pursuit. The British blacksmith is attempting to make holy swords. Their skill was already high enough that even the God of the Bible made note of it. Now with this latest piece of information, Raziel was sent to ascertain the identity of the blacksmith, and convert them to Christianity. Barring that, make an alliance with them. For Raziel it was a simple intel gathering and negotiation mission. Normally, adding a completely newbie to, well, everything such as Regel wouldn't be a big deal, as long as the youngest archangel followed Raziel's lead. However, there was a complication that made Raziel's mission much more difficult, and require a lot of stealth to carry it out. Azazel had heard of the mythical blacksmith as well, and was sighted in the skies of Britannia, with a squadron of fallen angels. Don't bother with stealth, and when you confront Azazel and your fallen brothers, let Regel respond to Azazel's first move. While that were Father's message only for Raziel, she was still surprised by it. Giving out commands like that, while any angel would follow them without question, Raziel tends to look forward to them, as those orders tend to have the most moments of Father's mysterious ways manifesting. Precognition just isn't enough of an explanation to Father's omniscience. Raziel by her nature had an aptitude to divination, or mentally simulate possible events, but even so, the Creator just seemed to operate on a whole multiple levels of higher dimensions in planning. She could perceive and sense everything in an omnidirectional space around her, and not just in the physical dimension but all the higher and lower ones as well. She is the untouched seraph precisely because nothing can ever blindside her. She had even trained her danger senses to the point of seconds of precognition warning to an unexpected attack upon her. So while almost all the fallen angels were focused on Raziel, throws arrows after spears of light upon her, even if those attacks would have been as plentiful as rain within a hurricane, she would be pure as the dawn's rays, unmarred by even a drop. Her brother, however, Raziel, with her divine analytical abilities and spending time with him, could tell he would not do well in battle for a long time to come. Ah. Oh. Eek. Too close. At least that's what she originally concluded. No, Regel didn't suddenly reveal some heretofore untold amounts of power. He didn't reveal some secret new power. He was just using the basic light empowerment techniques Raziel had time to show him, to move with greater ability to not get hit, and fire his giant waves of light to push away any assailant that closed in on him. Actually, the way he's moving, is heckaping me? No, not important right now. However, the power behind Regel's attacks were too wide to have any substantial power behind them. At most they would singe any fallen they hit. Raziel's eyes widened before they softened into a sad look. No, he simply doesn't want to hurt the fallen, even if he had never met them as brothers and sister. Ha ha ha, this kid's reaction is a comedy show. The leader of the Grigori, the fallen angel faction, laughed. Raziel sighed. And then there is Azazel. She felt an instinctive need to move in and protect her brother, but remembered God's words and held back for now, the attacks on her ceasing, but the fallen surrounding her made a blockage between her and her youngest brother. Yeah, well, Regel panted, stopping as the attacks paused, panting as he took the chance to catch his breath. Your goatee is stupid, he shouted. Azazel just sighed mockingly. Children. They really just don't understand the charm of an adult. Azazel began to stroke his facial hair, showing it off. I don't remember you though. I guess you're one of Father's newest angels. Well, why don't you come with your big brother Azazel, to show you there's more to life than the old man's boring repetitive ways. Like what? Regel said, unimpressed. Like this, for example. Azazel pulled one of his fallen subordinates near him by the waist, then grabbed and squeezed her breast, causing her to. With the buxom fallen's mouth open, he then proceeded to deep-tongue kiss her. Such heavy display of carnal, along with the emotions thrown by a magical being's aura, could disorient a normal angel, even tempt them enough to make their wings flicker black. Raziel had no reason to worry though. Regel continued to give Azazel a deadpan look. Such unaffected display caused the Grigori leader to stop, and throw the fallen woman aside, who whined as she floated away, and examine Regel once more. Well now, aren't you a tough cookie? New trainees are usually too thrown off by something like that, Azazel said with an interested grin at this new puzzle. Oh, Raziel! Azazel addressed the present Archangel. Is there something special this new one? Why don't you tell me? Came Raziel's detached reply as she observed everything. Azazel leaned forward as he actually looked at Regel, trying to see him with his angelic senses. His eyes widened in recognition. Why? Are you kidding me? Azazel threw his head back, a hand on his forehead, and laughed out loud. This kid is actually an archangel. He's so weak, no wonder I couldn't notice when I first saw him. What? Did dear old dad finally lose his touch? The other fallen joined in with Azazel's laughter. Raziel saw Regel was no longer looking stoic. His eyebrows now actually tightened and angry. Sadly, his childish face wasn't helping angry look. Some of the fallen actually odd. You fell because of some boobs, didn't you? Regel began. I'm surprised you even know that word. Azazel fired back. And not just some boobs, but the biggest, bounciest, juiciest and squeezable damn boobs I have first seen on a mortal woman. Man, the fun I had with those. So, it's large boobs that are your favorite, huh? Regel cut him off, having a conspiring raised eyebrow. Raziel wasn't sure what his youngest brother's strategy was here. Talking about carnal temptations was Azazel's forte. Yet, she followed her father's command and let Regel act as he wills for now. Yeah? Didn't I just say that? Azazel was thrown off momentarily by the young archangel's sudden confidence, before easily playing it cool. Is that so? Regel closed his eyes, smirked, before opening them with the confidence of a detective that solved a case. He pointed dramatically at the fallen leader and spoke. Big Brother Azazel, as this is our first meeting, and because I don't wish spill blood if I can avoid it, I will give you the option to take all the fallen angels here with you, and leave here today. Azazel snorted. Really? He chuckled. Oh, I gotta hear this. Or else what, little brother? Or else this. Regel raised hand to the sky and a large projection of a holographic cube was made. It rotated like a large TV with the giant blocks of text. The fallen angels tensed up for a moment, preparing for what might happen. A light show? Azazel said unimpressed. Ultimate move! Regel shouted. The words appeared as he spoke them, revealing Azazel's secret number 1. Huh! Azazel and Raziel, without noticing, at first, both held the same tilted head look of confusion. You said that your favorite type of are the biggest, bounciest, juiciest and squeezable and all that, right? Regel cried out like an interrogator. Raziel wondered if she should be worried that Regel was using Azazel's words without any hesitancy. His wings showed not a single iota of color change. So it was all good. Yeah, that's a lie. Regel cut Azazel off. The fallen angels present gasped. Azazel himself looked at Regel in surprise. There was a certain truth known to all 3 biblical factions. It was that angels, more so archangels, can't lie. It was against the very core of their being. Even if they learn to do so and manage it, their wings will give a very obvious tell of flickering black. Regel's wings never changed. Azazel was a very smart person. As an angel empowered by God, he was able to think and analyze things much faster than a normal human would. Upon hearing Regel's words, he was able to think on them and apply their context to past events and experiences, in the span of a few seconds, and see what that comparison would bring him. While it was that made you fall, the large size was just a distraction. A lie you made yourself believe? Because the truth is, Regel continued, upon realizing his preferred breast size were, Azazel considered what it meant about himself. Then his eyes widened in horror. More so about what that information would do to his image as the leader of the Grigori. Azazel then noticed Raziel had a teleport spell and a shield attack combo spell ready, in case he thought to attack Regel mid-speech. Azazel's true favorite size are Retreat, a forced mass teleport spell, available only to someone of Azazel's authority, activated and took all fallen angel along with their leader from the human world and back to the underworld. Raziel was stupefied. Holy shit, that worked! She looked back to an equally shocked expression from her brother. Both couldn't believe it. Back in the Grigori headquarters, Azazel's cadre found him in a lake made out of all their booze, with their leader trying to drown himself in it. He failed and drank it. Upon receiving the report of what transpired, it was decided the Archangel Regel was an infohazard threat to be mostly avoided, and if forced to engage, don't let him talk. It was added a bit too late to the report, when it was amended, that Regel wasn't just pleasant to look at, he's kinda cute, actually really cute, like I wanna snuggle him forever cute, said by one of the female survivors of the failed mission, but also have a nice voice. That wasn't the last time Regel and Azazel would meet on the field of battle. How did you know that? Raziel asked with a small smile on her face. It had been a few hours the 2 archangels' confrontation with the fallen. They had hid to lay low for a while, so they were just about to continue their search for the blacksmith in a stealthy manner, to not draw attention. Know what? Regel asked back. About Azazel's secret. Raziel replied. You didn't use some hidden spell, nor did some holy energy automatically act out in some instinctive ability Father granted you. She explained. So that information was something you deduced all on your own. So how did you figure it out? Regel suddenly felt on the spot. There was no way he could say I knew by reasoning it out of med knowledge. Because I just really don't want to get to the topic of my reincarnation and the details of it. Now how do I answer this? I knew about the reason Azazel fell. Regel spoke clearly, not bothering or stopping to explain how he knew. I noticed that he wasn't surrounded by as many large-breasted fallen as I thought he would have. From there, I had a hypothesis on the reason why that might have happened, and more importantly how it would look on him if it was true, so I just bluffed. Regel smiled and scratched the back of his head. Bluffed? Raziel raised an eyebrow. It wasn't lying, but it wasn't a tactic she expected an angel, a newborn at that, to use. Yeah, because honestly, thinking about it now, what if Azazel was just having an off day and wanted to change up the women around him? I would have looked really silly. Regel chuckled. Good thing I was more annoyed by him, though. Even more silly would have been falling on my first day in the human world because someone acted. Regel imagined the situation and dropped his head, letting out a sad sigh. Actually, it would be pathetic since it's my first day of being born. That's not likely to happen. Raziel shook her head. Huh, we're not human, Regel. Things like losing interest or getting bored don't come easily to us, and subsequently to our fallen brothers. Father had made us with immortality in mind after all. She explained. Huh. Regel blinked a few times at that. I see. It was an odd information to realize and internalize. More importantly, where did you get that weird idea? Raziel asked with an amused look. Seeing her brother's confusion, she continued. That you could fall from seeing an act. What? Regel stopped moving and floated in place, prompting Raziel to do the same. Raziel waited for him to continue. I mean, you fall if you are tempted into sin, and act out with that intent, isn't it? Regel asked. Raziel laughed. Where could you have heard that? She laughed some more, before calming down. Angels don't fall to something that trifle, but we fall if we have. Regel pointed out. Raziel's shoulders shook again. And no. No, that's not how that works. Yes, technically, but not because you had. Ha. She took a moment to regain her bearings. Okay, listen well, brother. 1. To follow and spread God's word, upholding the virtues of heaven, denying the vices of hell and maintain heaven. 2. To protect, guide and aid mankind so that they may exalt and seek all that is good and succeed in combating the temptations of evil. As long as you don't hold a desire above those two, then you'll never fall. In short summary, as long as you value Father, His works and humanity above other wants or desires, then you're good. Regel was stunned silent. It was actually a worry of his at the back of his mind, how easily it might be for him to fall. Something he was most definitely against, as he liked his life as an archangel so far. I mean, I get to work alongside God himself, well herself, it himself. How rad was that? So then Regel slowly gathered his thoughts. It's not actually having that's the problem. It's thinking physical pleasure is better and more important than anything else. Same with other sins. Being angry isn't a problem, it's letting it consume you. Simply indulging in the pleasure of exacting your rage on others, that's the problem. Exactly. Raziel nodded, glad for her brother's quick, mature understanding. Of course, that doesn't mean you can have with anyone without a care, you know. Regel looked back attentive and curious. Committing any's an opening way to temptation, or it's best to not do so ever. If you do, acknowledge that mistake, vow to correct it, and try to be better next time. Dwelling on mistakes and regret could also lead to falldom, so be careful not to let that consume you either. This is both easier and more complicated than I thought, Regel said, feeling a lot more relieved with this new understanding. What about marriage, though? What about it? What if an angel marries? Regel asked. Raziel gained a sad look. An angel and their married partner, or two married angels, can act as they please within the bound of marriage, and would have none of the normal fears of falling when it comes to carnal delights. I'm sensing a big exception coming, Regel said warily. But what about the child they produce? Raziel asked. Regel gulped. Are Nephilims forbidden? No, she shook her head. Miracle children aren't forbidden but celebrated. However, what if someone harmed that child? Or kidnapped them? What should the angelic parent or parents do? Would it be wrong of them to prioritize their offspring? Regel was starting to realize that some of those who had fallen hadn't done so due to agreeing with Azazel, or due to rebelling against God. Father tends to leave those whose mourning overtook them. They would lead lonely lives, or in the better case they would come to Father wishing to return to his embrace. They are never turned away, of course, Raziel said, giving some positive news, before the sad look returned again. But then there are those who return, not wishing for absolution, but for the pain to end while being of use to heaven. At Regel's melancholic silence, Raziel turned and began to fly away. Her brother followed without a word. The search for the blacksmith continued, the Archangel pair working tirelessly. Literally tirelessly, Regel noted. Although that might be because angels' stamina threshold is much longer than a human's. During their travel, the pair stopped at a village by the name of Carmarthen, and witnessed a disgraceful sight. Please, father, this is all the money I could save up till now. It's been 3 years already. A woman was begging a priest while handing him a bag of coins. He was holding the hand of a 3-year-old, whose lazy sight seemed to zero in on the 2 archangels in disguise. The priest, looking bored, counted the money inside, then shook his head. I'm sorry, my child, but this isn't enough for a blessing strong enough to undo your boy's curse, the priest said, all while putting the money bag in his robes. But you have come close. With a few more coins, I should buy the needed resources to make a blessing powerful enough to baptize your son. Thank you, father, but how much more do I need to bring? I don't know if I have anything else to. What's going on here? Regel barged into talk between the woman and priest. They were standing in front of a church house where the 2 archangels were planning to spend the night, but the argument they witnessed halted any thought of rest. Oh, are you 2 youngers lost? Do you need a place to stay for the night? The priest's eyes lit up upon seeing the duo, as under their shaggy travel cloaks were clean, refined clothes. What seems to be the problem, miss? Maybe we can help. Regel cut the priest off, addressing the woman directly. Seeing the youth speak with such authority was odd, but the woman didn't let that stop her. 2 made a mistake when I was young. Me child couldn't be baptized. Father Blaze said I had to pray and give many donations so that he could gain special holy water to purity my son from his curse. She said desperately. Curse? Regel asked. The devil's power runs through this child. You may not believe it, but it is true, and sadly beyond my current resources to handle. Priest Blaze answered on his own. So you see, travelers, this is not something for you to meddle with. The 2 archangels gave a slow look to the very well-decorated large church. Would a normal baptism have not worked? Regel asked, not to the priest, but his sister. No, she shook her head. It would have worked just fine. This man is simply a liar profiting off your suffering, child, while the priest sputtered out. I'm a man of the cloth. How dare you levy such vile accusations against me? You must repent for that sin, traveler. Hey! Regel ignored the priest and turned to his sister. Can you quickly tell me how to do a baptism? It's not long, right? You dare! You think anyone can do the work of God? I carry his word. On whose authority can you do this, authority that surpass mine? Priest Blaze shouted, the only one that matter. The authority of whom I am his messenger. When Regel spoke then, his volume didn't change, but the power behind his voice was unmistakable, even for the humans that couldn't sense the supernatural. So he can act as an archangel without prompting. Raziel smiled with fondness. Then looked to see that the handful of people that were around the church in this hour at the evening were transfixed on the scene as well. The priest stared with awe and growing terror, as he began to understand what was before him. The mother looked in awe, some fear and a growing hope. The boy seemed amazed, yet there was a lingering discomfort in him. That's likely from the demonic power in him, Raziel thought. Raziel. Her brother drew back her attention. The baptism. Ah, right. She quickly explained it. Regel nodded and moved to work. It's going to be all right, he said to the mother. Thank you, thank God, thank you. She held her hands to her face as she cried tears of joy and relief. What's your name, kid? Regel kneeled a bit, to look the child eye to eye. Murden. Murden Emrys. I was named after the town, the boy said, excited. The 2 archangels noticed how he spoke clearly without the usually stutter and stumbling of that age. Of course he is, Regel thought in amusement. Very well, Murden, listen. Have you ever had thoughts of causing mischief or harm, and instead of them staying thoughts, you acted on them without realizing it? The boy looked down in shame and nodded. I'm going to fix that. You might still have those thoughts, but how you act from now on, that will be determined by your own free will. Do you understand? The boy nodded with enthusiasm. Regel took some water from a nearby fountain in his cupped hands, blessed it with holy power, and baptized the half-devil. I baptize you, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. You do know this is gonna bring trouble for us, right? Raziel said once they were miles away from the town. Didn't you place some spell to hide the town a bit from demons, and erase our presence there? Regel asked. That doesn't change that people will talk, especially that priest during his travels, she replied. Ah, Regel looked to the side, blushing. Since you seem to have forgotten the role you took up, child. Leave this luxury, travel the land, and do works of good. Regel had not intended to scare the priest into following his order, but his anger at the blatant corruption may have let him forget to rein in his holy energy fully. The priest barely gathered some stuff to eat, and left the church and the town running. Hopefully we'll be okay, right? Less than 2 weeks later, Regel met a devil for the first time. Ha 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 ha, this is the new Archangel I hear about, that slayed a whole army of fallen scum. How pathetic. What the shit, Azazel? Is your organization's security so leaky that even the devils know about me in less than a month? In the moments he had between dodging tentacles of water, Regel considered that it was more likely that Azazel and his group released information about Regel as revenge. And not just a new fresh Archangel, but also Raziel, the Archangel of Secrets. Oh, today really is my day. Once I capture you both, I, Sarilina Citri, will rise to be most favored by the Satans. The ultimate class devil and her entourage were an unexpected problem for many reasons. The humidity of Britain in the current season made it conducive to the Citri's demonic waters. The coastal town the devils found the two archangels and gave them another advantage. And above all, Regel had come to realize the difference between him and an ultimate class devil. Raziel sighed as she weaved between attacks, then took the chance in the pause between enemy strikes to send a single ray of light through their bodies. Simply making a thin laser beam from her finger, striking at their vital areas. I cannot begin to count the number of times I've heard some upstart devil saying they will catch me, Raziel said in a bored tone. Oh, I would say it would definitely be different this time, the Citri devil shouted, as she raised her hand to the sky. Regel looked up to see a giant dark clouds have gathered. He looked around, now noticing how the sea water were rising further away and turning into clouds that moved overhead. It was done slowly on such a wide scale that he hadn't noticed till down. He could feel and see a massive concentration of water coated in demonic energy in that cloud. The rain that began falling seemed less intentional but like leaks from that massive spell. When I capture you two, I'm going to rip your wings out, Raziel. I'll pluck you feather by feather, flay your skin, take out every secret in your mind, before I cut off your head and shit down your throat. Sarilina laughed in triumph. Regel stopped. He floated in shock, his open mouth expression not hiding any of his emotions at all. Thankfully other devils had flown away to get out of the blast zone. Lord save me from the vulgarity of you devils. Raziel rolled her eyes, as she gathered her holy power for not just a shield spell, but one to teleport her and Regel above the cloud. I'll take your head, rub it all over my ass before I put it up on the wall. Then there is you, cute little Regel. Ilwy, are you looking at me like that? The sheer look of shocked disgust on the young Archangel's face caused Sarilina to momentarily pause in her tirade. Are you for real? He ended up saying. Ha! What are you scared, now that you face a real devil? Don't worry, I have different plans for you. Before I kill you, I'll... No, I get the torture and killing us bit, but do you seriously go around talking like that? Do you think it makes you look cool? Regel couldn't help but inquire. Oh, was my water too warm for you? Do you want to see how cold it can be? Sarilina said in a low, menacing voice, at the perceived insult. No, I meant cool as in, you know, like a role model. Like someone people look up to. Regel clarified. Huh! Sarilina was so confused she halted the launch of her spell. Raziel, seeing a pattern, decided to wait and watch the show. You know, like, do you think little boy and girl devils look at you and go, when I grow up I'm gonna poop like big sis Sarilina? Regel said, even doing a girly voice for the little devil girl character. Now it was Sarilina's turn to look shocked. Raziel snorted in her fist to hide the sound. And when I grow up, Regel said in a deepish voice to play the boy devil character, I'm gonna have a massive poop, just like big sis Sarilina. Oh yeah, well, I'll have the biggest poop of all. I'll be the queen of Sherdash. Will you stop saying the word poop? Sarilina cried out, red in the face. That's not the point of the threat, you little bird. You were just about to say shit, weren't you? Regel deadpanned. I wasn't gonna say shit. The Citri devil face was heating up. Seriously, what I am supposed to think with a threat like that. You didn't even sound sarcastic, like you're just saying it to insult Rez here. You said it with like you were into the idea. I'm not into that stuff, I'm just saying it as a threat, and that other part, I'll rub your head all over my ass. Are you penned up? Did you never have anyone eat you out in foreplay? Or are you just into gore and rubbing blood and body parts all over you? What if you have guests over? That stuff smells, and they would be smelling it out of your ass. Stop talking about my ass. Sarilina was beginning to cry now. The worst part is, you said that with such conviction, it sounded like you did that before. I mean, even for a devil that's a bit. Regel trailed off and looked to the side, like he was ashamed of seeing the Citri devil. It's just a threat, damn you! She shouted, tears running down her red face. Okay, yeah, you're right. My bad, let's just continue. You were gonna say something. Sarilina said with narrowed eyes, and what Regel didn't dare point out were pouty. No, let's just carry on with killing each other. No! You were about to say something. Say it, Lady Citri. Maybe you should. One of the devils with her tried to get Sarilina to go back on the attack. Silence. You. What? Were you going to say? Sarilina roared every word out. Regel seemed to struggle within himself, before sighed. Look, you seem like a tough opponent and a strong devil, but I thought to myself, if I was a young devil in the hell, would I want to follow Lady Sarilina Citri? And well, Sarilina seemed to smile at the hidden praise before Regel continued. The answer is no. I would be glad to have you on my side, but I would never want to interact with you. I mean, character-wise, you're not really charismatic or presentable. Silence permeated the area as Regel gave his reply. The Citri devil's face was shadowed by her hair. Her shoulders were shaking, seemingly in restrained rage. I hate you, you mean it? Sarilina bawled as she turned and made a portal to the underworld. Lady Citri! The devils with Sarilina ran in panic after her. The devils left, and the portal to hell closed afterwards. The clouds began to disperse with no magic holding them. Too kinda feel bad now, Regel said. There. Raziel patted his shoulder. Let's just take a break and go back to heaven and report to Father. Yeah, okay. And that is the situation in the Roman Empire, Father. Raphael finished delivering his report. The west side had completely collapsed at this point. Should we expect the Greek pantheon to start a move on Romania to regain their influence? Asked Gabriel. Regardless of the baselessness of it, Zeus is bound to blame us, given the spread of Father's believers in the eastern region. Uriel commented. The devils are likely to see this as a strong point that can't allow to persist unopposed. Sandalphon stated. So Nerona, Ravenna and Constantinople, those will be main locations of conflict soon. Michael stated. Should we also be worried about a focused attack from our fallen? They kinda have to, given what our brother did to them. Remil pointed out, giving Regel a side glance. A chuckle rang out in the meeting area of the Archangels and YHWH were in. I'm so lost. Regel quietly kept a placating smile. Raphael, Gabriel, both of you head to Constantinople, and keep the peace there. Serial, Sandalphon, Remil, Metatron head to Nerona, but keep an eye on the whole of Dalmatia, keep your guard up at all times. The Creator decreed. Finally, Michael, head to Ravenna and offer aid to those who need it, and retrieve an object I will tell you about later. Yes, Father! While Regel couldn't keep up with the discussion, he could notice everyone's emotional state. Something he did, mostly because he had nothing to do, and nothing to contribute. His Archangel siblings were all engaged, resolved and elated when given a task by Father. The odd thing, though, was that Father wasn't worried about sending 4 of his sons to Nerona, but was so on sending the lone Michael to Italy. If there is something worrying in Ravenna, then why is he sending so many to a different place? Regel wondered. And I, Father, what duty shall I carry on? Uriel asked with enthusiasm. You will head with Regel to Bresciana to continue the search for the mythical blacksmith. I fear your brother may have inadvertently invited many enemies with his victory over the Citri devil, God said with a small smile. Another round of laughter ensued. Let them come, let's see how many are humbled by our brother's words. Remil joked. I'm starting to think I should just learn to smite them, because even if when I cause problems later on down the line. Regel looked aside blushing, while scratching his head. Nay, brother. Uriel slapped Regel's back in support, causing the small Archangel to stumble. We all fight in Father's name in our own methods. And your words did nothing but deliver a truth that struck at the black hearts of those demons with how blinding it was. He said with a grin. Hear, hear. The other archangels said in warm support of their youngest sibling. Now then, those of you heading to Nerona, make your preparations, gather as many of your brothers as you think you need and fly by my will. The rest of you stay behind for a moment. God said, a little sad to break up the moment of camaraderie, but smiling in contentment at his children getting along. Yes, Father! The 4 archangels left, and then there were 6. Go ahead, Raziel. Ask what's on your mind. You're the usually composed. Raziel found herself hesitating as she glanced at Regel. Uriel, Michael spoke. Why don't you take Regel and teach him some of your fighting moves to prepare for your mission? Ha! A fine idea, Michael. Uriel, despite his usual demeanor, easily caught on, and was about to take the youngest archangel out of the meeting area, due to the sensitive topic Raziel wanted to bring up. Children, only for them all to halt, from a word of their understanding father. Regel knows about the beast. While Raziel found herself lost for words, she began to recontextualize all her time with Regel, and see if he had shown a sign of distress that she had missed. So were all archangels that were left wide-eyed from his news, looking at Regel now with concern. He knows about Michael was the first to regain his voice. Father, Regel is less than a month old. When could you have possibly an odd memory sparked to mind? A connection that seemed innocuous, till his divine mind linked the events. Regel didn't have a scarf when Michael first met him. He only had it when he first met all the archangels. Father must have a reason. Michael firmly decided. It was right after he was born, before you introduced him to us. The Creator nodded, confirming Michael's statement to the horror of the other great seraphs. They had all remembered the first time they learned of their father's great task. They remembered seeing the caged apocalypse. Raziel wasn't even supposed to know, but figured it out from reading the energies and emotions of her strongest siblings. Seeing the beast itself had halted her analytical mind, bringing her to the only logical conclusion that it cannot be beaten. Only her faith in Father gave her hope that it could be stopped. Gabriel was the strongest angel. It was not a contested point. Sure, Michael can win against her due to skill and wit, but in terms of pure power, she was Father's strongest warrior. Yet for all her strength, all her might, she couldn't envision the monster's death. She couldn't envision victory. Same for the others. They felt the same thing upon seeing the beast, the trihexa. Clear, simple despair. The oceans would be corrupted by a drop of its blood, and no power of Raphael could purify it. If Uriel could change the fires of the sun into holy flames, it would not erase it. And Michael, more than anyone else, Michael understood the magnitude of the task Father had. The urgency and danger of it. It's why he took on as many tasks as he did. Why he was the most dutiful son, completely any mission, anything his father ordered him to, all to alleviate the burden on God, because even if he never voiced the thought, even if he never dared think it, the possibility of the worst-case scenario was not one he would never want to be, even a thought in a dream. Father will succeed in sealing the beast. The rest of them have to ensure their Creator isn't overwhelmed and overtaken by the great war afterwards. Seeing the trihexa was an enormity of a profound experience that left a mark on each archangel. It's why their searching eyes continued to look at Regel and were confused to find nothing. The mention of the beast did not startle the youngest archangel. It did not make him pale, go into shock from memories of dread. In fact, he looked more uncomfortable from their stares than the discussion about the beast. Regel, you saw the beast before you met us. Gabriel floated till she was in Regel's space, holding his face in her hands, staring intently at him. Yeah? He looked toward her in confusion. And you're not afraid? She asked with razor-sharp focus on her eyes. Of course, I'm afraid. Regel's quick response surprised the strongest angel, enough for him to get out of her grip. I mean, it is pretty scary, but, he rubbed his cheeks with his scarf. It's something we'll have to beat later on. So being scared of the inevitable is pointless. Silence greeted him, so Regel continued. I mean, we still have to deal with the Great War, so we should focus on that, and later on think on way to defeat the beast for good. It's still a long time, so I figured we'll come up with something by then, you know. The response to Regel's answer were mixed. For a while his siblings stayed silent, before each coming to their own conclusion. Haha, yeah, you're absolutely right, little brother. I have to say, I wish I reacted the same as you when I was in your place. Uriel clapped a hand on Regel's shoulder, his voice filled with pride. Before it, though, he felt pity for the young Archangel, thinking he was likely repressing and distancing the memory of the beast. You're right, Regel. We should do what we have always done and have faith that Father will guide us. Raphael praised Regel, while feeling guilty for not being as assured as his little brother had been, that their father would have a solution. I see, Gabriel nodded, closing her eyes for a moment, before opening them and truly smiling again for the first time in a long time since this war started. I suppose if our youngest were to hold that sentiment, we should do any less. I really had been resigned before, hadn't I? A greater fire burned in evermore, in what was once Gabriel's cold resolve. Father, could you please aid my training with a chronotic room, before I leave for my mission? Of course, my child. God nodded. It would take a bit of his time and power to make that short-lived time-altered dimension, but it was worth it to see life shine brighter in his daughter's eyes. Michael wanted to protest God making the chronotic room, but if he in his wisdom didn't deem it a problem, then so would Michael. In his view, he began to see that Regel wasn't as innocent and unworldly as he thought. He began to form an idea of what Regel's duty was after the war. Is that why he was gifted with great insight and speech? To point out flaws in others, and give paths to redemption? Finally, as for Raziel, her curiosity about Regel was ignited. At first he appeared as a simple, straightforward picture of one of God's angels. Now, he was a surprise mystery that she couldn't wait to dig into. It couldn't be just a simple anti-fear immunity. Father wouldn't bother with something like that, no. Something else is at play. Raziel cleared her throat, getting everyone's attention again. Very well, if Regel already knows and isn't bothered by the discussion, then I shall continue. Raziel spoke. First, Father, how is your health? Are you feeling well? You don't need to rest, do you? Also, are there any other philosophies you need us to research to aid in your seal creations? God sighed before smiling fondly, as with that question his children began to fret over him. X equals. What do you call a world made of all colors combined, but not white? The bubble color, what's it called? Iridescence? Yes? Kinda? No, now it's white. Wait, it's iridescence white. Okay, no, that doesn't make sense. At least the place is warm. No, it's not warm, it's yellow. Did I just think it feels yellow? Regel could still sense an odd warmth in his being, while his mind told him that place he floated in had no temperature. Finally, the Archangel threw his hands in the air. Okay, I give up. Father, we're in the stuff. Are we? God laughed, his mirth and happiness resonating with the odd wholesome realm, and reflecting back to them. Relax, son. We've only just entered. What? Regel shouted in alarm. We've here like 10 maybe 30 minutes if we're stretching it. You were simply too absorbed in experiencing this realm, that you didn't notice not much time had passed. God had a mysterious knowing smile. Okay, I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be the opposite. Time moves fast when you're having fun. Regel was full of skepticism as he made a finger gun gesture. Not in this realm. The Creator continued to be coy as they floated in the homey everythingnessness. If that was a way to describe it. Okay, Father. Regel said patiently, feeling his father was having fun at his cost. Where is this? In the deepest part of the spiritual world. The place where dreams and stardust meet. I suppose for simplicity's sake you could call it the astral sphere. God explained, again the knowing smile was there. I'm going to regret asking this, no. I know I'm going to regret asking this, but I want to know. And for not simplicity's sake? Regel said with great hesitancy. We are within the Aqua Doctrine. I suppose another name for it would be the Sea of Souls. God spoke with all the flair of a teaching, enjoying his subject. Regel was now much more alert, looking at everything with focus, before quickly turning back to his father lest he loses himself in the allure of this place. Is this paradise? Like the actual place, not just the fields in the fourth heaven? God shook his head in that way that said good guess but not quite. Everyone is always worried about what happens after they die. He continued by way of carrying on his explanation and answering his son at once. However, most don't consider where they were before they were born. Here, Regel began to smile as he looked around again in excitement. Suddenly the world was divided between a underscore then underscore and then. Why don't I remember words for the colors? No, I remember them, but those aren't black or white. Regel looked around only to find his father a million miles away. The halves crashed. The Archangel covered his head and screamed, only to feel the familiar arms of warmth and joy engulf him, and the world returned to its iridescent homey state. While this place is a wonder, it is as dangerous as it is safe. What does that mean? It means don't worry, I have you, my son. Regel nodded and latched tightly onto God's arm. The feeling of danger was already long gone from father's presence, but Regel didn't want to let go. Dodo, you make souls here? Regel asked, wanting to think about anything else. He felt it was odd how the luminescence of this place could be so beautiful in its ever-changing shapes, yet somehow there were no boundaries to make shapes. Yes and no, God said with mirth. Are you gonna keep giving me mysterious answers? Regel deadpanned. I am giving you the full answer, Regel. God said with a smile of a parent who understood something their child wasn't old enough to get yet. He then shook his head and looked forward, as he and Regel continued to fly. While yes, human souls are born here, so are every other living being. For the most part, one give them a push to allow themselves to realize that they are. That sentence doesn't. Regel stayed quiet, thinking about it some more. Okay, so this place is like one giant soul, but it has no definition. He looked to his father to see the approval in his eyes, pushing him to continue. Because they don't have an ego, and you help them see that they do, sort of. An ego is for living beings that can self-introspect and realize they can think about themselves. This is more like making the empty will that it is conscious, thus slapping into shape. A soul is then formed from the want to exist. God said, of course doing so makes the soul its own independent entity, free to float in this sea till it makes its way, and is pulled into the physical world. God then extended his hand to a bundle of space. That seem heavier? Thicker? Than the rest. I'm gonna have a migraine trying to understand this place before I leave. The Creator simply touched the bundle of soul water, before placing his hand in front of it, like a sailor extending his hand to someone on at sea with life jacket. The bundle jumped/shined, and before God and his Archangel was the brightest orb any had ever seen, held in the Creator's palm. His Regel moved closer to the sphere, in awe of its majestic wonder. Is that a soul? He looked back at his father. It is, my son, God said, smiling at his son's jubilant exuberance. It's beautiful, Regel said as he turned back, wanting to watch his wondrous thing for as long as he could. Is this someone important? He asked excitedly. I mean, it has to be, right? Look at how bright it is. Regel looked back only to see his father's smile turn wistful. Everyone is important, Regel. The Archangel was stunted back at the melancholic tone in his father's voice. This is how all souls look before they begin their journey. In all my existence, there wasn't a single one that wasn't a joy to see in its inception. God gave the soul a small push, and then it was everywhere, flying slow, fast. It journeyed along the entirety of the sea of soul and remained in place, before vanishing in seemingly resigned stubbornness that turned snarky joy. But I've seen people, Father. Regel looked back at God, feeling pensive all of a sudden. That shine, there I may not have seen their souls, but their emotions, they aren't anything like that. Yes, there is goodness and light, but it doesn't shine nearly as that. They forget, Regel. The Creator said with patience, knowing his son was coming to a heavy realization. The journey of life, in a sense, is them rediscovering that light once again. There were near tears in Regel's eyes. He didn't know why. Are devil's souls also like that at the start? He didn't know what answer he wished for. A part of him hoped his father just wouldn't answer, or give him the answer that would ease his mind. Yes. Of course, reality was seldom a wishful comfort. All souls, all races or beings, yes, any the realization crystallized into understanding. Any soul lost, any of them is a tragedy. It is. I wish you had never told me. Regel slapped a hand over his mouth the moment the words left. Of course it was already. Father, I'm sorry, I didn't mean. It's okay. God hugged Regel. It's okay, Regel. What you're feeling isn't wrong. Regel hugged back his father with all his strength. He clenched his hand around his clothes, till his knuckles were white. The Archangel wailed out loud, tears falling without end from his face. He didn't feel he lost anything but the veil of ignorance. In its place, Regel felt what he was given an understanding on responsibility so heavy it would crush him. For the first time, even in his father's arms, he felt worry for the future. Uriel had not expected Regel to have made so many enemies this quickly. Nowhere to run now, Regel of the barbed tongue. One of the thousands of devils shouted, as they surrounding Uriel and Regel and their small company of angels. Less than a week upon landing in Britannia, the group had been found and chased through Wales, till they were surrounded near the Black Mountain. You think you will slay us so easily, you demonic wench! Uriel cried out, the glow of his holy blazing sword keeping away even the most encouraged of devils. For now, Uriel's other concern was his brother. While Regel learned how to use the holy flames in surprising speed, and could wield it with expert proficiency, it had neither the strength nor weight of Uriel's own. Regel also couldn't use the holy flames for long, his stamina easily running out with them. More than that, though, was Regel's pacifist behavior in battle. In the beginning he would simply dodge and push away the attacking devils. When that became too much, and they began threatening the other angels, Regel would take those rushing devils down, with swift debilitating strikes, taking them completely off battle and off being a threat. Never killing them, though. Uriel didn't know where this pacifist stance came from, as he knew from Raziel that his brother had killed the devils that cornered him last time. More so, these were the enemies of father. He should show no mercy to any of them. I'll have to talk to him later. We might fail. You are a difficult opponent, Archangel Uriel. The leader of the devil army spoke. An army made of devils from the Citri, Gremry and Baal households. A leader by the name of Venelana Gremry ne Baal. But what of your friends? She said with a vicious smile. Would they also prove difficult, or would you be able to protect them all? Venelana's smile was terrifying, as was her spikeful armor, colored as like rusted blood. Spheres of destruction circled around her, and a giant mock halo floated behind her back and wings, acting as a firing station for her power of destruction. You damn devil! Uriel moved to cover more his younger angel siblings. Regel stood by his side, a surprised look on his face. Uriel didn't have time to question him on why, simply too focused on the situation at hand. And you, Regel, today you'll pay for what you have done to my friend, Sarilina Citri. Venelana pointed with a vile glare at the boy-looking Archangel. For your sake, I do hope you don't die just yet. I want to gift my dear Sarilina with your mangled body. I hope she could get the chance to have some fun with you before you expire. Venelana made a sword with her destruction powers and held it in a ready stance. So before I kill all your beloved siblings, and cut off your wings, why don't you try that sharp tongue on me? I promise, I won't run. She finished while baring her teeth. The battle seemed to halt as everyone awaited Regel's reply to the pre-last stand banter. This is all so overly dramatic. I should talked one devil and now I have 3 armies after me? Isn't this escalation a bit too much? Congratulations? Huh! Venelana blinked at that. Everyone on the devil's side either thought the reply was funny, or were confused by it. I mean on the baby. Regel clarified. The shock of that statement had nearly all the devils, eager for battle, to pause and look at their leader. What baby? Who has a baby? Some devils began to talk among themselves. What? Venelana was thrown off her battle-ready mind. Brother, what are you talking about? Uriel asked in a stressed voice. He was sure his brother didn't lie, because obviously his youngest sibling would never use such a sinful tactic, so he was ragging his mind to figure out what he meant. The only obvious answer made him wonder how Regel would know that Lady Venelana is with child. By the way, brother, is it possible to negotiate a ceasefire? I really don't want to fight a pregnant woman. Regel's explanation threw the enemy army into disarray. Lady Gremry, we must retreat. And give your husband the good news. Shouted on Devil in glee. A child. We must celebrate its dark bringing by making it rain the blood of angels, shouted another bloodthirsty yet tearfully happy devil. And how do you know that? Venelana said, seemingly unaffected. Do you think such a distraction will buy you time? Well, I knew because you currently look like a MILF. Regel casually explained. What? Venelana raised an eyebrow at the new term. Devils are natural shapeshifters, right? So when I saw how you looked, I figured you were doing it intentionally or subconsciously to show you're pregnant. He replied. How I looked? Venelana gave a small look at herself, before quickly focusing on the enemy. You know, like a thick mom. Are you calling me fat? That's such an elementary insult. No, thick with 2 C's. As in voluptuous in a way that makes you very desirable and breedable. The Archangel said, in a tone in contrast to the debauchery he was explaining. His angel siblings certainly looked at his tactics in confusion. Uriel, having heard Raziel's reported, decided to float closer to the angels, and let his brother do his thing. Damn him for saying what I was thinking, said Random Devil, before his friend shushed him, saying the show is just getting good. And MILF? Venelana asked with a raised eyebrow, if she was eye-catching to the innocent Archangel, making seduction a possible tactic. Oh, it's an abbreviation. A shortening of a phrase by taking the first letter of every word in the phrase, and combine them. MILF is short for for mommy I'd like to. Both angels and devils gasped at the words coming out of the Archangel's mouth. Even Venelana found herself blushing at the unexpected vulgarity. Did that Archangel just say the word? Did he just say he likes to mothers? Are we sure he's an angel? The devils began gossiping between themselves. There is just something extremely delectable about something so innocent saying the word. A citri devil commented. I know, it's why I like seducing little virgin boys and then have gentle while cuddling them, said a gremry devil next to said citri devil. Gasp! You slut! As the devils continued to talk among themselves, so did the angels. Did Lord Regel seriously just use such language? Said some angel. That's naughty, admonished another. Can we talk with devils like that too? Asked a third. No, Uriel answered. Your brother can handle interacting with devils without being corrupted by them. Do not use his tactics or words without training and approval. He quickly put his wing down on the matter, and got a chorus of affirmative for it. Although, the flame of God really was beginning to wonder where his youngest brother was going with this. Mostly though, it's because I can see a life in you. Regel continued. If you don't believe me, you should be able to check yourself. Venelana placed a hand on her stomach, trying to search for any sign of life within her. You! She wanted to discredit the Archangel, but all devils knew of the angel's relationship with the concept of truth. He didn't lie, nor did he show any signs of it. After some time, she did find it. A small of demonic energy, connected to her, but not her own. The Lady Gremry couldn't help the smile that came to her face before clamped down on it, to keep her stern gaze. Well, the calm, and annoyingly not smug, but rather concerned voice of the Archangel, made her look back up to him. What do you say we continue this battle another day? No one has to die. Venelana clenched her fist as she considered her situation. When a female devil discovers they are with child, they are usually set aside to do light duties, unlike their normal ones, as the children of devil tend to have stronger, or more refined version of, powers than their parents. While not a big deal if they died due to Lord Lucifer making more when needed, it is viewed as a shame. A lost opportunity. She wasn't some common devil though. She was a born a Baal with the power of destruction, and married into the Gremry, a family that held the devil's luck. Or treasure finding as the plebeians would call it. Venelana Gremry was considered a genius with her demonic powers, and her child would inherit that and his father's fate favoring luck. Losing that would not be a small loss. And yet, as she looked at the half a dozen angels and 2 archangels, she assessed the situation to see that she had all the advantage. What is he looking at? For a moment it seemed like Regel was staring at something far away. Spreading her senses wide, Venelana tried to find if there was anything noteworthy there. All she could find were the devils with her, the angels she surrounded, the humans far below on the ground, and the few unimportant magical beings in the forests running away. Regel then shook his head and focused on her again. Did he seriously daydream in the middle of this situation? Venelana snorted. Admittedly, the Archangel didn't turn out the same as Saralina's description, seeming far more weak than her friend let on. He didn't even kill any of her forces, letting his big brother and minions carry on the bulk of the attack. She considered maybe she shouldn't bother, and just tell the angels that she'll show them mercy today, and let them stew in the humiliation of them. Unfortunately, her snort was heard by those near her, and interpreted differently. "You hear that, Glow Feathers? Lady Venelana thinks your offer is shit," said a confident Baal devil. "Hey! Don't use the word shit." A Citri devil hissed at the Baal devil that spoke. Venelana sighed, and she supposed she will continue the fight after all. She would change her strategy to long-range combat, but her victory was all but assured anyways. "Apologies, little Archangel. I'll be sure to treat you gently." Venelana licked her in a bloodthirsty manner. "Of course, you can avoid all of this by surrendering." She threw out the proposal on a whim. "We only came to take one of you, so if we take him..." She pointed her destruction blade at Regel. "I'll let the rest of you leave in peace." Argument began to break out among the devil ranks. A simple burst of Venelana's power shut them all up. Then she waited for how the archangels will respond. "You dare offer us such filthy disguised mercy?" Uriel began to rant, his wings and blade glowing with raging righteousness. Only for Regel to hold his brother back with an outstretched arm. "Lady Gremry," when Regel spoke this time, all the friendliness was gone. The seriousness of his voice was such a change it put all the devils on edge. "I'm giving you all the chance to leave here with your lives, on account of your joyous occasion. However, if you do not..." "If we don't?" Venelana had a small grin, wondering what the youngest archangel will pull. Regel sighed, losing his sharp expression. "You guys are all lucky I'm not a fallen." "And why's that?" Venelana asked, raising an eyebrow at the non sequitur. "Because if I were, I would have done this." Regel raised his hand to the sky with strength and purpose. The devils tense, the angels watched with heightened nerves. A magic circle sprung around the held-up hand, and gathered energy as Regel declared with angelic might. "Summon dragon!" The devils' eyes widened in terror, as they burst into action. Some ran away. Some tensed as they held their weapons in front of them, and the most loyal and attentive moved to surround and over their leader. Moments passed. Nothing happened. Laughter started in a small echo in the devil army. Then it rippled and grew till overtook the devil army, and was heard around the Black Mountain. "Ha ha ha ha," and Venelana laughter was the loudest and most recognizable. "You seriously had me going there for a minute." The space between the angels and devils rippled as if crunched into a smaller form, and when it returned to normal, a large white soft-edged serpentine western dragon was there. Dre-re-a-ig-ig. Albion had never in his life felt as enraged as he did thus far. Except for the last time he had faced his most hated nemesis. Victory was assuredly his. It was finally in his grasp. He was finally about to bite into Draeg's neck, fill his body with poison while ripping out his throat and spine, only for that ing cheater to pull some shit from the Hindu pantheon and deflect my half-dimension flight lunge. Now Albion found himself on the other side of the British Isle, surrounded by those bats and white birds of the biblical factions. One of them had launched some spell the moment Albion appeared, causing the rest of the white birds to be teleported away in flashes of light. That weak white bird then fell, depleted of power. The self-sacrifice almost made Albion roll his eyes, as he had no interest in fighting the angels. While Albion had no need to bother paying attention to the white bird, the Archangel used what scraps of power he had to direct his fall toward a nearby lake. The bats, however, began flying about in a panic. Some fleeing, some actually attacking Albion. He didn't really notice, as simply spinning around to face Draeg's location caused his body and tail to slam into a large number of them. Most didn't stay afloat. Albion didn't bother or care to see which survived and which didn't. They were all equally beneath him. The leader of the devils had rapidly ran away, using her power to destroy space in order to place more distance between herself and Albion, before escaping into hell. The vanishing dragon supposed that was the only thing of note in this meaningless encounter. With a flap of his wings, Albion flew ever higher. With a flex of his will, space halved and he was gone. "Father! Father, help!" The moment Uriel found himself back in heaven, he flew as fast as he could to the throne to meet God, after making sure the angels with him were safe and in one piece. Uriel didn't know how Regel had been able to use Raziel's salvation spell, or even when he could have learned it. It was a complex spell that was used as a last resort to teleport all angelic beings in range to the safety of heaven. However, the mechanics of it were so difficult to grasp due to its multiple moving parts, that only Raziel could use it on the fly. Second was the cost of the spell. While the number of angels Regel used it on weren't many, Uriel wasn't sure if his youngest brother had the power to teleport 6 angels and an archangel without exhausting himself. Or worse, used his life to do it. Uriel threw the thought aside. He would only accept the worst if he had confirmation of it. For now, he simply needed to talk to Father about mounting a search and rescue of Regel. Father, we need to save Regel. Uriel quickly composed himself and gave his report. God listened with patience, and thankfully had his ever-calm smile by the end. That was usually a sign that all would be well. Fear not, Uriel. Your brother is not lost. It is such a relief. Uriel let out a long sigh, as he placed a hand on his chest, feeling his heart beat even through his armor. He is in the fairy realm. What? Uriel screamed in shock and horror. I'm so lost. Regel was glad that his mind stayed calm under pressure. Or if that was a trait of his angelic biology, then he was glad for it all the same. When he had used that spell he saw Raziel prepare once, he was able to decipher what it did and how it worked. He hadn't been sure if he could cast it though. He figured he may have gotten some emergency Shaonan power up, from the danger of the situation he was in, but it also made him running on empty afterwards. Regel thanked God, or well his father, that Albion didn't pay attention to him, or that he wasn't worth being on the Heavenly Dragon's radar. He also didn't want to think about how he knew Albion was coming. This sudden new power to see souls after visiting the astral sphere with his father, Regel didn't want to even contemplate what it meant. Why or how did he gain it? He didn't want to think about such questions. The last thought in his head before passing out was of the Sea of Soul, the Aqua Doctrine, head to the water. He thought to himself. And then his eyes closed. When he woke up, Regel flapped around in a panic thinking he was going to drown. Turns out archangels didn't need to breath. Lucky that. He then tried to head to the surface, which led to the current situation. No matter how far he swam, he couldn't go up and reach the lake's surface. Regel tried to swim horizontally to reach the lake's land and walk out, but couldn't do that either. After a few minutes of intense swimming, which was just flying through water, he found something that might be a solution to his situation. Is that a cottage? Vivian Dulac stared at her newest creation in annoyance. She then shattered the newly forged blade again on the anvil, letting out a screech at another failure. When she calmed down, she looked at the new blade that began to slowly repair itself by pulling on the light from the surroundings, and the element of light, Vivian synthesized with magic. She had been trying for years now to make sword that would surpass Ascalon and Duranal. In her life, she had created many wondrous and powerful magical items or weapons. She could create any magic artifact she would want. She could even make a demonic sword to surpass Graham, if she bothered to do so. But due to her skill, due to her knowledge and ability, victory would always be the end result, so why should she even bother? No one can surpass the biblical God in creating holy swords, until she heard that phrase. She had been living a life in contentment, following her duties as a Fey Lady in Avalon, creating magic items upon commission or challenge to her skills. Yet upon hearing that phrase, she couldn't help but wish to prove it false. Fem, this should be completely easy. It didn't take much effort to witness the 2 greatest holy swords, and examine them as they were used by the church to combat devils. They were beautiful. Vivian couldn't help but think. A work that surpassed any blade she had made in sheer power and craftsmanship. A competitive fire burned in her once more, and she set about to create the perfect holy sword. She had never bothered trying to reach the realm of the divine before, there was never a point. But now she will do so just to prove she could, except she couldn't. As Vivian had came to discover, working with the holy element was difficult. Not because it was inviolable and unstable, but quite the opposite. It was too solid, too orderly to be changed. For the perfect holy sword, she needed something that wasn't just powerful, but versatile. The exact opposite of holy power once it was set in a certain path or pattern. Demonic energy had been much easier to work with, given how malleable it was. The challenge was beating it into concert shape, which she was always capable of doing. I need something to work it. I need to study the holy element in action, Vivian said, thinking to herself. No, I need to see it in a more purified form. Not the spells used by the clergy or angels, but something higher than that. She then snorted, as if such thing would fall on her lap. Vivian then felt vibrations reach from the lake in the human world, all the way to her personal realm. Those damn angels, fallen and devils, are they fighting close by again? Vivian activated her surveillance orb, only for her jaw to drop as she saw the vanishing dragon appear above her home. She immediately sighed upon seeing the dragon turn and leave, right after arriving, taking some satisfaction from seeing the disarray the angels and devils were in. Wait, is that an archangel? Vivian looked at the group of angels under a holy spell of sorts, before they disappeared. It was a teleport spell, and among them was an archangel. Damn it! She grabbed the nearest tool, a hammer, and threw it at the wall, where it crashed into the wood and stayed in place. In a few seconds, the wall would self-repair by magic, so she wasn't worried. What the hell am I supposed to do now? She grumbled to herself, before sighing and went back to her desk. Even if she needed to study a purer form of holy energy, she might as well see what she could discover from the cash she did have for now, before she went on a material resource gather trip again. Knock. 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 A knock on her door? She didn't get many visitors. At least not to her own personal home. People usually prayed to her at the lake if they wanted to request something. Personal visitors were usually from the desperate or the powerful. Something powerful would have alerted her wards by now. Something desperate would be bothersome for a while, and then leave when she doesn't answer. If it's something playing a prank, or a dare, however well her wards can detect intention somewhat, and she hadn't had much entertainment for the past while now. Knock. 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 No one's here. Go away, Vivian said in a bored tone and focused on her work. Knock. 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 This time it came from the window next to her. The only area where one could breathe was the front door. Going to the window wasn't advisable, as the house was still underwater, and even if the visitor could breathe, the water pressure should make holding their breath and swimming difficult for them. Thus, with a raised eyebrow of a bored, condescending look, Vivian turned to her window. In the darkest pit on hell, within the capital of the damned, Lucifer, the first Satan, languished within his castle, in his throne room. Lucifer watched with a bored look as his creations, the devils, those worthy to be his generals, were discussing and arguing within themselves the logistics of the war. Usually it would be some bullshit on which family needed to add more forces on the constant assault on heaven. Sure, in the thousands of years since the war began, they have yet to reach past the first heaven, yet the attack must press on. Just as long as their side paid the lowest price. If they keep this up for another 10 minutes, Lucifer was going to kill one of them, so they can start being productive. That usually results in one of them having a useful or creative idea. I wonder if Aphrodite will go for it. He thought of his latest corruption and the idea he proposed to the Greek love goddess. It is during Lucifer's reminiscence on one of his most creative ideas, a child made of devil and fey blood, hidden by incubating it within a human woman, that one of the Lucifuge family who were Lucifer's personal servants came and whispered something to him. What? Lucifer shouted as he stood silenced the chaos in the room. He took some deep breath as he gathered his thoughts. That ing God. A migraine fell upon every devil in the room, making any below ultimate class struggle to retain their balance. It was an effect specific to when Lucifer spoke the Lord's name, which he did even if it harmed his minions. Fine. He turned to the Lucifuge servant, whose name he didn't care to remember. How did they find the Cambion? Who did it? Michael? That ing brown nose, Raziel? Well, the Lucifuge devil told him. Who this Regel? X. Thank God that's finally over. Regel thought as he left God's workshop. No, he did not care for the irony in that thought. Seriously, that should have taken 10 to 30 minutes at most. Not several hours. Nevertheless, it was that talk was done, and he was free. With ample time, he can make it back to Vivian without worry. Regel, he looked up to see his 3 sister archangels waiting for him, Raziel, Remiel and Gabriel. "Brother, we would like to speak to you about a few things," said Gabriel as the spokesperson of this group. "Okay?" Regel wondered why he started feeling worried. "Chiefly among them is your martial ability," said Gabriel with a serious expression that left no room for confusion about what she wanted them to do. The moment the words left her mouth, the youngest Archangel summoned his holy power. "Salvation!" Regel shouted, and apparently had forgotten that Raziel had came up with the spell. Tick-tock. The first day Vivian was too busy remaking her wards, which to her irritation she found out weren't broken. Rather, it was like all the tiny weak points that could theoretically used were lined up and widened, all to pull out Regel, then closed up again. There was still a hole in her roof though, so the first day was one where Vivian rebuilt her wards piece by piece, as though it was a magical ship of Theseus. Tick-tock. The second day Vivian started working on remaking and improving her wards. She had thought they were at their strongest, but it looks like she slacked off. Well, now she will truly make them impenetrable. She also couldn't stop thinking on Regel. She was going to see him again, right? Soul-related magic was the most potent there is, so clearly the biblical God won't be so merciless as to keep him back, out of some jealousy, right? No, Regel always espoused on how kind their father was. So they won't be punished for interacting with a fairy and incurring a debt, right? Vivian pushed the thought away for now. She needed to perfect her wards so nothing could go through them. In fact, let's add Arondite as one of the centerpiece for transforming and shifting wards. Now that I made the fortress defenses, let's see some thieves try and sneak past these. Vivian giggled at the thought and went back to work. Tick-tock. It was the third day and Vivian couldn't keep still. There was a large smile on her face, as she went about cooking some small amount of food, to show off to that chibi Archangel who's the ruler of the kitchen. Sure, her feast table was filled over, but that's because she cooked a tiny bit of many things. Maybe there might have been one or too many lasagna dishes Regel showed her, mentioning it was his favorite, but that because she didn't notice she made the first or second one. Silly her. After cleaning up the house, finishing the food and enchanting it to stay warm, she sat down to do a little reading. She had nothing better to do, she couldn't read. Her eyes would slide off the pages and look at the clock. Tick-tock. He should have been here by now. Vivian was drinking some nice calming tea. Not for any reason, she was already calm. She just liked the taste. Liked it so much she was on her 5th cup. 12 hours till the 3-day period was up. Regel was late, but still in the safe zone. So it's fine. It's all fine. Vivian was fine. Tick-tock. 8 hours left. Honestly, that no good, teasing little feathered brat. What is he thinking not being here by now? It's his life he's playing with. Is he an idiot? Is he stupid? I even made the contract to ensure the time in the human world and the Fey world would sync up when he traveled. So 2 days should have passed in his world. He should have rushed here much earlier. Vivian was pacing. She was pacing so much that she wore down a literal trail on her carpet. Honestly, she had prepared many things for that Archangel, and yet he still didn't show up? How dare he? Well, she was taking away all the food, and won't greet him when he comes back. It will all be just back to work right away. Tick-tock. 3 hours left. Maybe he didn't plan on returning. Vivian thought, laying down on the floor. The carpet broke down from her walking, so she burned it. She'll get another one later on. Maybe she can go shopping with Regel, if he'll appear already. Vivian shouted to her empty home. She huffed and rolled over, ate on the floor with her hands and feet for a bit, and let out a squeal of frustration. She huffed once more as she lay her head on her arm, and tried to empty her thoughts of anything. I'd better get up. It will look bad if he arrives only to find me laying on the floor like some street urchin. Tick-tock. 2 hours left. What if it's my fault? Vivian thought, sitting on her large cushioned chair with her legs pulled, and rested her head on her knees, rocking back and forth. What if I made the wards too strong? Vivian considered reasons for why Regel hadn't arrived yet, till she reached her current conclusion. Sure, the wards were now so thick one might mistake Vivian to have been in war. Of course, the entrance being left as a way-in would be a clue that the lake fairy wasn't paranoid, or thinking she was in battle. If said entrance wasn't covered with dozens of spells to identify intent, subtle, hidden, magical or otherwise, and would boot out even potentially unaware enemies. The only people that could even stand in front of her door were those with no ill intent. The only ones who could enter were those who Vivian specifically invited in, and actually liked their company. Was that too vague? Do I not like Regel as I thought? Do I dislike or hate him deep in my heart? The answer after some soul-searching was no. She did not dislike him. Maybe I should lower the wards enough to look outside. Vivian considered. She had made it so that she couldn't observe the outside of her house, as some magic users or beings could use observation to teleport. The only thing she would detect outside her home was anything with neutral or negative feelings toward her. That's the problem, isn't it? I wouldn't have noticed anyone outside who had goodwill toward me. That's it. Vivian went to work on her wards. Tick-tock, 30 minutes left. It had taken a considerable amount to work in a hurry, but she had managed it. Vivian could now see outside of her house, and there was no one. Is he too late? Should I just take the whole thing down? As she looked at the clock, she realized there was no time to do anything. Even if she hurried with all her strength, she couldn't take down the wards. They were made too strong, durable, and self-repairing. She racked her head for reasons why. Why was Regel not here yet? Why did he not appear yet? Was it possible he lied to her? Everything confirmed that he did. So why? I should have given him more time. Vivian stared at the clock in despair. 3 days were too short. She could do nothing but start at the spot Regel was summoned from, and the clock on the wall. 10 minutes left. Please, please, Regel. Please come back. Vivian pleaded in her mind. 5 minutes. Should I pray? Is that it, you vengeful God? Do you just want me to submit to return my love without harm? Were you jealous that Regel dared to care about me? Well, what is it? 3 minutes. This is stupid. Vivian muttered and left the spot Regel was summoned from. 2 minutes. She came back to the spot and started praying. Fine. I pray to you, O merciful, generous Lord. Let me see Regel once more, safe and whole. Please return him as you took him. Please give back my love to me. 1 minute. Regel, Vivian muttered, the name literally heavy on her tongue. Her eyes watered as she had come to realize. Regel was important to her. It had been a short few months, but in that time, the innocent, pure, mischievous Archangel had captured her heart. For the first time she felt like she wasn't alone, like there was someone whose company she was glad for. Someone whom she did not want to do without, and now she had to face the possibility that she would never see him again. Because she didn't trust him to return to her. Regel, I love you. She said the words as though saying goodbye. A ball of light flashed on the spot Regel left from. It expanded and in a second flashed out and left the familiar small Archangel in place. Hey Vivian! Father, did I miss you? I know it's been 3 days for you, but for me, it's been a few Idiot! Vivian grabbed the Archangel and pulled him to her bosom. Stupid! Fool! Imbecile! Half-wit dunce dolt! What kind of moron would come back at the literal last minute of a 3-day magic contract? I almost lost you, you thick-head dullard, she cried out, tears falling from her eyes as she hugged Regel as tightly as she could, not wanting to ever let go. Lovable idiot! She cried again in a soft tone, smiling as she felt the Archangel's hair against her cheek. While Vivian was letting loose her feelings, Regel had a different thought in mind, while enjoying the warm embrace. Father returned me literally a minute before time was up to make a suspense bridge effect. Nice, Dad. Regel literally could feel a divine thumbs up in his head from his heavenly wingman. I'm here, Vivian, Regel said, rubbing circles in the phase back. I'm here. You're okay. As Regel told reassurance to his fae friend, and maybe more, he slowly tried to move her toward the couch so they could sit down. A difficult endeavor to be sure, as Vivian didn't want to let go in any way, which forced Regel to fly them both to the couch with Vivian latched onto him. Easy there. While tears of joy are beautiful on you, as you are the lady of the lake, the snot not so much. Regel chuckled. Stupid. Vivian pinched him, and pushed down a laugh while hastily using magic to clean up her face. Don't you know if you say that to a lady, she might curse you? If it's someone I care for, I don't mind bearing any curse, Regel said as he finally separated, and now they faced each other. Someone like you, he said just to drive the point home. Vivian looked away blushing. Cheap talk won't be enough to make up for the distress you put me through, Vivian said without heat. Sorry, Regel said sheepishly. Idiot! She shouted. What did I tell you about apologizing? Vivian said as she felt the debt increase in her favor. Ah, right. Regel rubbed the back of his head. Don't worry about it for now. Or rather, it will end up being paid off later on from some stuff later on. He shook his head, then looked at the fairy intently. Vivian, there is something important I need to tell you. Vivian straightened at those words, fearing the worst. What is it? My sisters want to meet you, Regel said gravely. Excuse me? The words didn't register right away. Yeah, Raziel, Remiel. With each name, Vivian's thoughts began to race as she became more and more focused on facing this challenge. And Gabriel want to meet and talk to you. Vivian paled as she began to think on how to deal with this obviously very important meeting. How much time do we have? Father said he'll give us a sign. A ringing and a flash of light came from where Regel arrived. The two looked to see a ball of light with the number 110 on it. The 10 started decreasing. Oh, we have about a minute. Vivian jumped and ran around the house to preparing everything in a panic. During the 1 minute of alarm, Vivian had to seriously consider if she maybe wanted to strangle Regel or not. Okay, first, my glamour. Yay, they already know what you look like. What? How? Father decided to make the last report all the archangels made visual, so they already saw what you looked like. Wow, wait. Your father showed all 4 months we spent together to all the angels of heaven? Nah, just the highlights. Phew, like you cuddling me in your lab when you overworked yourself. Awaya. Also, they know your name from me, which protects from them using it, right? That's not important right now. They likely think I'm some sort of cradle robber. Wait, you're not? Arg. Vivian lunged at Regel, hand stretched to his neck, only for Regel to jump into the lunge to hug her, barring his face in her bosom. You. Vivian's face burst red as her thoughts halted for a moment. By the way, 20 seconds left. Regel looked up to her face with a smile. Ayawayawa. Vivian threw him off, from which he just floated away, and went back to making her home presentable. 20 seconds were up and the ball of light shined, and in its place were 3 archangels. Hello and welcome to my humble home. I greet you as the lady of this house and the lady of the lake, Vivian said, the picture of elegance and calm, while Regel stood a bit away from her, covering his mouth with his hand, trying to appear as stoic as possible. His shoulders were shaking. He failed. Under a glamour, Vivian hit him with her elbow once. We greet you as well, Vivian, lady of the gleaming lake, Raziel replied, using Vivian's full title and the added epithet specific to her. Since there were multiple ladies of the lake, each one has an epithet that in some way relates to the talent that gained her title. Gleam referencing the light reflected of her swords. You have a beautiful home and it's a pleasure to see it, and you as well. I hope we can get to know you better on this visit. Welcome, I have prepared a feast. Please partake and enjoy yourselves to it as you wish without bounds, Vivian said back, noticing that Raziel's words were careful, showing that she prepared herself to deal with the Fae. Vivian was at least glad that there would hopefully be no misunderstandings. Shall we move to the dining area? Will you show us? Said Remiel. This way. Vivian led them to the feast table. She also noticed how not saying please and thank you were grating on the archangels, but they followed the Fae etiquette to the best of their ability. Vivian thought that maybe there should be a way to lessen the contract magic instinctive to the Fae, so that things would be a bit more comfortable to some of her guests, like the angels. After everyone sat down, Vivian took a bite to show the food was safe, as to let the guests eat as they will, since the owner of the house already began dining. Vivian's smile froze, and she forced herself to look normal, as she saw that Gabriel, who had been silent till now, had placed Regel on her lap. So, why have you come to see with such haste, archangels of the Lord? Vivian began the small talk. In your research to make a holy sword, you need an archangel to study holy energy to a better degree. Gabriel was the one who answered, cutting off anyone from speaking first. I would like you to transfer your debt with Regel to me. It should serve your goal, as Regel is the weakest archangel, while I'm the strongest, meaning you'll get the better research study for your holy sword creation. Who starts a conversation like that? Vivian shouted in her mind, while keeping her smile. Looking around, she noticed that the other two female archangels and Regel were also just as surprised at Gabriel's deal-making attempt. It was a normal day in the first heaven during the Great War. The devils were constantly attacking in mass droves. The angels were defending with fervent zeal, and then a red dragon emperor crashed into both sides. "Where is he?" Drake shouted, focusing more on the angels than the devils. Shit. A dragon is on our side. We can finally break through deeper in the Holy Winged Air's territory, shouted one optimistic devil. It was his last day too. Last day before a week-long vacation, of course, not last day on the war. Then he wouldn't get another break for 100 years. "Bring me the dragon summoning angel," Drake shouted, and of course while thrashing around and hitting everything, a swing of his claws vaporized a platoon of angel. A swing of his tail and wings splattered a dozen battalions of devils, thinking the sudden arriving dragon was on their side. Including the optimistic devil mentioned before. "Bring me Raquel. Summon my one true enemy. I want to fight Albion now," Drake continued to shout. "We don't know what you're talking about," shouted Ariel, taking her post and defending the first heaven today. Her shout got Drake's attention, enough for her to get another word in. "We don't have an angel by the name Raquel, and literally no angel can summon a dragon." Drake opened his mouth and breathed fire in response. "Ariel!" Cassiel, friend and usual paired buddy, shouted and pushed her out of the way. Ariel stared in horror at her friend, the incoming flame, and no, neither she, Cassiel, or anyone around would survive. The draconic flame reached the angels, and was met with holy flames. "Fear not!" Uriel shouted as he and the other archangels arrived. "Sanctuary." Sariel cast his signature spell. An all-purpose defensive area of effect spell, and increases the durability, power, and range of all holy magic. It even provides healing for allies within the range of the spell. Holy amplification. Raphael cast his own spell to reinforce Uriel's flames. Even with all that, the holy flames were burnt and eaten by the red dragon's flames, and would soon overtake them. Divine resonances. Metatron and Sandalphon cast their synchronized spell, causing both flame attacks to go out of control and explode. Holy wall. Raphael and Sariel cast the barrier spell, stopping the explosion from reaching their side. The backlash of the attacks had damaged the devil's side far worse than the angels. The devils strategically flew further away so as not to get in between the angels and the red dragon, but close enough to observe. "We'll have to hold out until Father arrives," Raphael said in a quiet tone to his brothers, but his words were transmitted to the angels with him as well. "Those injured retreat, the rest defend as best as you can. Stay safe, brothers. Dragon, you have no quarrel with us. We cannot grant you your wish for your enemy, for we have not the ability to grant it. If you do not leave here now, you'll have the might of heaven itself strike down upon you," Uriel demanded with angelic authority. "Bring it, squeaky birds." With a roar that shook the Great War's battlefield, Drake launched himself at the archangels and their brethren. It's been a whole hour of an archangel and a fairy telling each other to sod off, and let go of Regel in a very polite manner. It would be so funny if it wasn't terrifying. And I wasn't literally stuck in the middle, Regel thought as Gabriel placed another piece of lasagna in his mouth. "You kept saying making a holy sword was delicate work. And yet you still haven't given a reason why it has to be Regel," said Gabriel. "I have said why. Starting my research from scratch to accommodate your specific holy energy would be too much work. I would even have to create new instruments because of how strong you are," Vivian countered. I wonder if Vivian is struggling in his conversation because Gabriel had yet to make a single personal attack, or because Vivian is actually trying not to cause any actual animosity between her and my sister, Regel thought. Thus far Remiel had been either eating, or covering her mouth to hide her chuckles. Raziel, after having a brief meal, opted to just observe the talk between the two headstrong women. Regel couldn't get into the conversation, because whenever he so much as opened his mouth, Gabriel would just feed him something to keep him silent. Gabriel didn't want Regel to open his mouth, and put himself into further debt to the fairy. "Just why are you insistent on keeping my brother besides you? I can't trust that you won't harm him," Gabriel finally said. "I would never do that," Vivian shouted, as she slammed her hands on the table, standing up. Gabriel was about to do the same, before remembering Regel was on her lap, and settled for leaning forward and glaring. Regel felt the weight on his shoulders increase. If I may, Raziel interjected to stop the argument from escalating beyond words. I believe we are missing something important in this discussion. So, I would like to ask you both to reclaim your calm for a bit. Looking at her, the two aggressive women held themselves back. Vivian even sitting back down, and Gabriel leaning back into her chair. Regel let out a sigh of relief. I hope this poor conduct didn't sour your meal. Vivian said diplomatically. I'm sorry too, Raziel, said Gabriel. It's fine, sister, Lady Vivian. I understand how heated some topics can get, Raziel said with a calm smile, hiding her sly intentions. Like family members beholden to forcefully serve vows, Gabriel nodded, her eyes showing determination again. That's not it, Vivian vehemently objected. Regel isn't my servant or slave. I would never treat him ill, and yet that is the nature of your bond. One where he must serve you till your conditions are met. He assists me, not serve me. The Fae tried to argue. How you implement your contract now might not be the same in the future. Who knows how your relationship would go, or if things between the two of you would always be amicable. Raziel raised a hand to stop further argument before she finished her point. I am not dismissing that you two seem to treat each other well, or suggesting that in some forceful effort to protect Regel, we should limit or change interaction with you, Lady Vivian. Raziel gave Gabriel a pointed look, who had the decency to look away slightly ashamed. Rather than the nature of your contract that concern us, should it be changed to all sides would find more agreeable, you would have your favorite assistant. Raziel struggled not to chuckle. Vivian blushed under a glamour, which only Regel saw. And we would have the peace of mind that our brother will be well, when with you. Raziel explained. Vivian calmly thought on the Archangel of Mystery's words. What are you proposing? She's saying cancel the stupid debt and get married, you idiots. Regel blasted her way into the conversation. Vivian nearly lost her glamour. Only interactions with Regel helped her train herself to maintain it under surprising turns. Tact, Regel? For father's sake, tact. Raziel muttered, sighing as she rubbed her temples. Gabriel pouted. Aye, that is. Vivian appeared quiet and contemplative, but was stuttering under her glamour. Of course, we also need to ask someone who has been silenced till now, Raziel said, sending an amused look at Gabriel and Regel. The youngest Archangel placed his hands over his mouth, while the older Archangel's fork paused, the food attached to it inches away from his covered mouth, ready to feed him again. I don't want to eat any more, said Regel in a low tone. Gabriel. Sister, Raziel said pointedly with a lopsided smile. Gabriel sighed and put the fork down. Now, Regel, Vivian, what do you both think? Asked Raziel. What about the bride, wealth and dowry? Vivian asked, finding the topic of Adil's details to be familiar ground she could stand on, till she got her thoughts in order. Regel. Raziel gestured, and the Archangel of Hope stood up, with a flash of an inventory spell removing an object. Regel had a bundled wrapped up large object in her arms, which she handed to Vivian. Vivian took the clothed item, slowly, instinctive casting spells to look for any poison or curses, before widening her eyes, as her magic identified what's in the wrapped cloth. This is. Vivian pushed the chair back from the table, and unwrapped the item, already knowing what it was. A holy sword. Her eyes widened upon seeing which one. Durandal. Vivian looked up in shock, her eyes going to all the Archangel. Seeing only Regel was as surprised as she was. Father decreed, for the cancelling of Regel's debt, you may study Durandal to further your holy sword creation research for a day, and you would have two of us sans Regel stick around to supervise and take back the sword after the time period is up. Gabriel said with a firm tone, that hid her reluctance. For making the vow of marriage, however, you may take the blade for a year and a day to use as you wish. Supervision will be left up to Regel. The youngest Archangel looked up at Gabriel in surprise, then back down to see Vivian also staring at him, mouth open in shock at this new development. Vivian stared back down on the blade, trying to rack her mind on what to do, or how to proceed. And that dowry? She asked, looking back up at Gabriel after a long look at Durandal. It should be obvious, shouldn't it? Regel commented with a shrug. It would be the product of your research. Raziel clarified. The holy sword created by a winter fae. She paused to let the news sink in. How do you know I won't cheat you on this deal? It's pretty vague. I could make something great, then give you an inferior copy afterwards. Vivian couldn't help pointing out. Raziel turned to her brother. I suppose it all depends on our little brother here, she said. If Regel accepts this vow as well, his word alone would be enough for us. Whether you give us the real thing or a weaker variant, if he trusts you, then heaven will do so as well. Regel was now the center of attention. Raziel looked on with calm enjoyment of everything, Remiel with open amusement, Gabriel with worry, while Vivian was a mess of emotions. There was hope and yearning, yet fear and anxiety. Finding himself on the spot like this, Regel took a moment to look inward. So this is really happening. He didn't think he would face commitment like this so soon, but with a strong resolve, seriously look inward at himself. What do I actually want to do? Do I want to marry Vivian? I mean, my whole interaction with her started as a joke, but now it's serious and he guess I don't mind? The moment he completed the thought, Regel mentally recoiled in self-disgust. Images of his past life, of him just going with the flow, getting married because it was the expected thing to happen. Because he didn't mind, he didn't dislike the woman ended up marrying. No, this isn't like that. Regel forced any thoughts on his past life to the far dark side of his mind, never to think about again. I actually like Vivian. I actually like spending time with her. I'm hesitating because it's a big step. It is a big deal. That's what commitment is. Images of a possible future came to mind, of a peaceful life with the war over, with him and his wife living in a simple house, surrounded by their children. And I could mess it up. Regel looked back at the nervous Vivian, and I'm afraid of hurting her. Of getting hurt. He concluded. I think Regel started, only to realize he was still sitting on Gabriel's lap. Excuse me, he floated up, and left his seat, moving to Vivian, and grabbing a seat to sit close and facing her. Regel? Vivian looked uncertain at the Archangel's quietness. Vivian, Regel began to formulate his answer again. You didn't want to? Vivian's glamour acted neutral, but he could hear the worry in her real voice. I actually do, Regel finally faced her, an odd relaxed smile on his face. Not right this moment, but I actually don't mind it in the future. Like the very soon future. It's just, Vivian let out a breath, and cast a glamour to make herself focus, and actually think on his words, and on Regel and what he is saying. Her anxiety was still there, but she was easily able to push it down now. You're afraid. She noted. Yeah, I mean, what if I mess up? Regel looked down, and just let the floodgate on his worries open. What if things break down between us, because I misunderstood something? Or I couldn't have this relationship as a priority, because the war demanded precedence? Or in the future, if we have a child, child. Vivian's face was ablaze once more. And we drift apart, or they just get detached, and we can no longer connect. He looked up to face her again. I am fine with dying for Father and Heaven if it's to fulfill my duty, but with a family my life isn't just mine alone. I have to live to fulfill all my duties. To Father, Heaven and you. I can't afford to die, and it is a surprisingly heavy responsibility. Thing were quiet as everyone took in Regel's words. Vivian extended a hand, and took one of Regel's that was laying on his lap, and held his hand with her own. There were too many things she wanted to say, yet couldn't voice them all out. She just felt happy at Regel's acceptance. At him placing such importance on her and their relationship. Vivian began. Actually kinda glad that you're afraid. Huh? Regel looked back stupefied. Vivian giggled. I'm glad that this is so important to you, that you thought about it to that extent, she said. But you know, you're not alone in this. I also have duties to uphold, and I will not fail them or you. They locked hands together. So even if it's scary, I want to face those challenges with you. Your fear mean you'll do your best not succeed, and so I will do the same. Vivian and Regel smiled at one another. So Regel, you heard her answer. Raziel spoke. You don't want to get married now, but do want to in the future, after being sure of this match. Yeah? Regel was startled, as he forgot his sisters were there for a second. Remiel chuckled, while Gabriel frowned, before sighing in resignation. Raziel continued to smile warmly. Then you're in luck. The marriage vow won't be exchanged until Lady Vivian's blade is delivered. So till then, you'll both just be betrothed, promised to each other. Raziel explained. How does that sound? Vivian looked back at Regel with a smile. I suppose marriage would be too quick. Very well, I accept this betrothment, till I finish the dowry for my Regel, and I accept it as well. Regel smiled back, squeezing Vivian's hand with his own, and feeling her response back. It was a peaceful, fulfilling moment that would shape relations between angels and fae going forward. Then the whole lake shook with the tremor of an earthquake. The defenders of heaven struggled with all their might. For the most part the devils all but retreated, allowing the angels to focus their efforts on the dragon. The forces of heaven were holding out, but slowly, bit by bit their numbers were dwindling. Drake roared as he slammed into the holy barrier made by 4 archangels. Raphael, Metatron, Sandalphon and Uriel maintained the barrier, while Sariel attacked. Bright Nova! A sphere of condensed holy magic was shot from Sariel into Drake's face at point blank after the dragon hit the barrier. The red dragon roared in rage rather than agony. The spell, while powerful, was slowly and limited in the area it affected due to its focused strength. Had it been a devil or a fallen, they would have been crushed and shredded. For a normal dragon it would be enough to fell them from the sky. For Drake it annoyed him and made him more eager to fight. The dragon flew back a bit, recovering from the attack too quickly. He's going to breath fire again, alerted Metatron. Barriers once more, shouted Sariel. Boosted flame. Drake cried out, forming and launching his breath attack, much faster than the archangels anticipated. The seraphs knew they won't make it in time, yet called on their holy power anyways, to fend their weaker siblings if nothing else. Glory unto God! Shouted Uriel, calling on his flames with every ounce of his being as he flew past everyone. Uriel! Raphael and the others called after him. Uriel didn't stop. Uriel's flame grew till they enveloped him. All of the light within him was pushed outward, as he drew deeper onto the essence of what his father made him with. Not just light but fire, thing matter that produced light, heat and pushed forth life, or destroyed it. What Uriel called upon was the divine essence God had given each of his creations. The spark of light that was unique to each individual. What one would call the light of their soul manifested outward. For many they would search their whole lives to unlock it. For a human it would simply be known as Tuki. For an angel they can already access a small portion of it as the holy light. And for an archangel, Chakma incandescence. The flame of God set himself alight as he let loose the divine essence within without any control, only focusing it outwardly as his fires burned brighter than ever before. The blazing archangel drove into the sea of fire, yet his shine was still visible. Drake realized too late that Uriel was aiming to stop the dragon fire at the source, and pushed out more flames. Only for Uriel to shout out in determination and burn brighter. The archangel slammed into the dragon's mouth, causing an explosion whose shockwave extended out through all the battlefield. Impressive, the Red Dragon Emperor admitted, showing a slight respect for his opponent. Yet pitiful. As now Uriel was caught within the dragon's maw, Drake crushed his jaws to feel and taste nothing. His prey was no longer there. It seems I arrived just in time. A figure more radiant than any other stood in the skies of heaven, holding on to his son in his arms. You really have been quite noisy. Why, Drake Gotch? God spoke, as his aura extended outward, healing all his angels of all injuries no matter how severe, then to the rage and despair of the watching devils from afar, revived the few killed angels back to life. For the first time since the battle began, Drake grew quiet, acting more cautious, and observed his opponent. So you're God, huh? The red dragon grinned, his teeth resembling rows of towers of death. A bit small for someone supposedly so strong. Father. Uriel looked around, then at his father in surprise at being alive. He quickly flew from his father's arms, to fly under his own power, so as to not inconvenience the Creator too much. You did a good job, Uriel, but it's still too soon for you to call upon the Holy Spirit within you. Yours and your archangel siblings were made a bit more volatile your other angelic brethren. You need more enlightenment to use it correctly. the Creator said. Yes, Father. Uriel answered with full focus on his father's words. Shouted Drake, I have not forgotten you, Red Dragon. God said, turning their glowing divine eyes to the dragon once more. Feeling that gaze, even Drake felt a shiver run through him, before he broke it with prideful rage. With a gesture from his father, Uriel flew behind to join his siblings, knowing this battle was as good as over. I know that you won't listen to words, but I will tell you this anyways. I and my angels do not lie. We simply do not do it. The force within those words forced Drake to acknowledge them as true, even if he refused to accept that truth, or rather he didn't care as much anymore, as he found an opponent that annoyed and excited him. You think that will save you from my wrath? Drake growled out, still grinning. God chuckled, seeing the dragon's challenge as cute. Simply clarifying a few things. We do not have an angel named Regel, although there is one with a similar name, and he does not have the ability to summon dragons, or your rival. That was simply a rumor that got out of hand, and finally, God shifted their stance, making the dragon tense, and prepared for the attack. Before we do this, I have one question for you. A last request, is it? Drake bellowed out in laughter, enraging the angels present. God just smiled. What do you think of Lucha Libre? God asked. Huh? What's that? Sounds dumb. God jumped high above the red dragon, arms extended upward in a V shape and glowed brilliantly. To Kara! And then God body slammed the red dragon emperor into the earth where he stayed unmoving. Drake wasn't dead. He just couldn't move from the sudden consistent pain that suffused every muscle, bone, nerve and all of his body. The red dragon didn't know that holy light could hurt like this. He already experienced it from the archangels and it wasn't like that. Hey, the great dragon let out a wheeze. Then God dropped a mountain on top of Drake. Father is amazing! To think you could defeat and seal that vicious dragon so quickly! Shouted Metatron in excitement. Seal? The next day, Drake, who was still in a world of pain, had the minor pleasure of seeing his fated enemy slammed into the earth next to him. Albion had heard about the battle of his rival waged against heaven in search for him, and so the white dragon went to face the forces of heaven and demand that tell him where Drake is, as well as fight him to prove he could slaughter a greater amount of them than Drake. God arrived and elbow dropped the white dragon on his neck, before grabbing him by the wing, flipping both of them till they are facing the ground, and then spun and flew toward it at great speeds. When Regel would hear of this, he will shout in dismay at missing God preforming an initial lotus drop on Albion. Then God dropped a mountain on both Drake and Albion, after the first one broke from Albion's fall. After that, God dropped another mountain on top, fused both mountains, then shrunk and condensed them, making them look like a hill. Thus the region of Snowdonia, in northwest Wales, gained a very dense hill. Seeing his rival, all thoughts about his loss to God were pushed back into the recess of Drake's mind, and he could only focus on battling Albion. Even with all the pain wrecking him, Drake gathered up all his strength, all his will, and moved a finger. Albion could only do the same, and so the two dragons, red and white, battled each other under the earth. By trying to poke each other, a gentle light seemed to fall down, or come into being and chime around the archangels. It was right after the verbal agreement between Regel and Vivian had been amended. Regel felt the debt binding him fall away, and a new bond take its place, one equally held by him and Vivian. The contract this time was the most flexible one Vivian had engaged in. Vivian would be loaned Durandal for a year and a day. During such period she could study it as much as she wanted or needed, and upon completing her holy sword, she and Regel could form a marriage contract if they wished. During that time Regel was mainly free to spend as much time with Vivian as both wanted, except for when Regel was called away by God. It was as frightening as it was exhilarating to have such a contract, because despite allowing so much leeway, she felt reassured as it was with Regel. The light then was there, and the archangels were given a new task. Intent, rather than words or images alone, were transmitted to them. Go help Michael return to heaven, and deliver the item he went to find. The archangels understood immediately what they must do, where they must go, as well as who this mission applied to. What's going on? Vivian asked, appearing calm, taking the new development and show of God's power in stride. The light only appeared for a few seconds, holding the archangel's attention, then lessened into the normal light of the cottage. A mission from Father Gabriel noted with seriousness. Gabriel, Regel and I will have to go find our brother. Regel will stay with you, as he wasn't called upon. Your company was quite enjoyable, but we must be on our way. Raziel said with a smile, as she and her sisters were about to leave. Regel's noise got their attention. He looked from Durandal to Vivian to his sisters, appearing conflicted for a moment, before just giving an encouraging smile. Good luck, Raziel noticed, but didn't say anything, just smiling. Of course, and may God be with you too, brother. Goodbye for now, brother, said Gabriel with a gentle look. Try to focus on the work, and not on each other too much. Regel said with grin, leaving Regel to give her a dry look, and Vivian a huff, while actually blushing under her glamour. Vivian saw Regel's troubled look, and understood his concern at all three of his sisters being needed to retrieve the Archangel Michael. That meant their mission was likely a dangerous one. Wait, Vivian said, stopping them. If your mission requires all three of you, it would be wise to assume it's dangerous to go alone empty-handed. Take this with you, she said, presenting Durandal to the female archangels. Regel snorted, before covering his mouth. All four women looked at him in confusion, only to be met Regel shaking his head, gesturing for them to go on. Are you sure? Asked Gabriel as she went to accept the holy sword back. Yes, a cursory look was enough to sate my curiosity. Vivian then huffed nonchalantly. Besides, I plan on making the perfect holy sword. Basing it on an existing one would tarnish my skills, with critics thinking I can't make something wholly original. But we promised. Gabriel felt bad that even if they followed the letter of the agreement, even if it's only verbal, they weren't following the spirit. Gabriel, Regel interjected. If she wants to help us, then she's free to do so. Don't put down her charity, said the Archangel of Hope. Besides, we can always return the blade once we get back from our mission. Didn't you hear me? Vivian interjected with a confident stride. I said I didn't need it anymore. You don't have to bother with such needlessness, eh? But, time of the essence. Go on now. Vivian almost made a shooing notion. She is right, Raziel said with a smile, trying not to laugh, having figured out the Fae just didn't want others to intrude on her with Regel any longer. We must be on our way. Speaking of said young archangel, he was currently smiling brightly at Vivian for her action, who was trying to not appear affected by his actions. That she was above the need for such praise. Under her glamour, she was preening. The archangels said their goodbyes, and in a flash of light they vanished and a ball of light was left in their place. Then the light ball flew into the ceiling, disappeared through it, and from the house and lake completely. So Vivian turned to Regel, smiling that they were finally alone. Shall we get to work? Can we rest a bit before that? I feel way too full to do anything right now. Ah, right. On the shores of a small Saxon-occupied sea village named Icon, in the East Anglia region, ships and boats were dropping another group travelers. Both Saxons and Anglos. So, you still haven't changed your mind? An old Saxon boat captain told the young boy he just dropped off. Still the same, said a young boy who only recently came 10 years of age. Medraut, I know you don't have anyone, but you would if you stuck around, talked to people. Going at it alone like you plan, you're not gonna last the week. And that's if none of the damn Britons don't kill you on sight. The old man warned once more, knowing his words will fall on deaf ear. But he had to try one last time, since he felt some sympathy for the kid. Enough already? Medraut waved him off. New land, new people, I'll figure something out. What's the point of a new start, if I'm going to live the same way everyone else had been doing? The old man shook his head in exasperation. Medraut's idea of starting a new life was literally walk into the forest, live there for a while, then find a Briton village that would accept him, and just start a new life there. A plan that pure, idealistic and above all, dumb, could only come from the mind of a child. The old man wasn't going to stop him, he wasn't Medraut's father, and compassion only goes so far. If the kid gets himself killed, then that's that, and if he succeeded, well, guess the gods favored him. The old man was about to say something when the sky lit up and all the people, Medraut included, looked up to see in the far distance a large object falling to the earth. Medraut's eyes widened, as he saw a colossal white dragon and a divine figure grappling and dive-bombing it from the sky to the earth. The two distant figures kept falling till they disappeared from view. Then a loud rumbling was heard, and the ground all of Britannia shook slightly. There was panic and shouts for a few moments, with some mentioning that same thing happened the day before. "You still want to go at it on your own?" the old man asked, wide-eyed from what he just witnessed. "By Freya's massive tits, yes." Medraut couldn't stop his grin if he tried. A new start, a new adventure, carving his own path in a life worth living. What more could he ask for? Praise God! "Whoa whoa whoa!" shouted a squire as he jumped up and down the training field. "Hey Hector, did Artie hit his head or something? Since when is he so pious?" asked Sir Kay. "Since he saw God punch a red dragon into the earth," said the old knight. Kay looked at him incredulously. "That's what he told me. I mean, I did see a dragon falling in the distance, but I'm pretty sure I didn't see the Lord or anything else," Sir Kay said slowly. "Well, at least he's enthusiastic about training now." Sir Hector shrugged but couldn't help smiling as he watched over his young charge. "I'm gonna train till I can beat dragons with my bare hands like Jesus Christ," shouted the young Artie as he swung his practice sword with enough energy to disrupt the winds around him. "I don't remember reading that in Bible class," said Kay. "If they had, Father Eliot's lessons would have been way more engaging." Hector nodded in agreement. "Michael, come out, wherever you are." A malicious voice rang out in the forest near the Montoni River. Archangel Michael was hiding in one of the caves in the area, trying to catch his breath, hide his presence, while keeping the holy light circling through his body. In a normal confrontation with the devils, Michael's victory would be unquestionable. When Lucifer enters the field, seemingly out of nowhere as he is never consistent on where his location when he appears in the many battles between heaven and hell, around the known world, Michael would be able to match him blow for blow. Their strengths and abilities were complete opposites to one another, making nearly all their matches end in stalemate. This time, however, the mission his father had sent him on was taxing his ability to focus his light, as at any moment he has to choose whether to fight Lucifer or keep his mind from falling to the object he was told to retrieve. "Come on, Michael. Just give me the box. It's only been a few days, and I can already see you're barely holding on." Lucifer's voice rang out, not giving his location away. "As if you would do any better. Even with your evil, you would succumb all the same." Michael made sure to keep the thought in this time, rather than voice it out loud. The box pulsed with a colorless energy, calling out to the Archangel, promising victory and relief if he would just open it. If he would release hope. Michael could feel the goodness emanating from the Greek pantheon item, calling out to give hope to the work and return the light. Michael shut down that thought, sweat falling down his brow. His father warned him. He knew the truth of what lied in the bottom of Pandora's box. He didn't need light to return to the world, for it was already here, by his grace. The rumbling and a loud flash of heat and sound went overhead. When Michael looked up, the whole cave was burned out, and Lucifer was visible flying in the sky. "Found you," he said with a smirk. "It really is the tough to fight, isn't it?" Lucifer said rhetorically, as he began to slowly descend. "Quite fascinating that it is potent, don't you think?" With a flash of light, Lucifer held a sword that at first look appeared real and metallic, but in truth was made wholly of light. "You will not have it, Lucifer." Michael glowed with holy light, engulfing his being, as he made a blade of light to match his fallen elder sibling. While Lucifer's blade gave off no light beyond a shine from its metallic surface, Michael's was a dense concentration of light that would burn any demonic being that looked at it. "Brother, I really don't want to kill you." Lucifer sighed with sympathy. "Can't you see? Father gave you an unreasonably heavy task. One that even you would fail. Another bit of this, and you could even fall. While I would rejoice your freedom, I know it would kill your heart if that were to happen." The Satan said his sweet words, "Let me take the burden." "Ah yes, because it wasn't you and your legion of the damned that was chasing me for the past weeks." Michael didn't roll his eyes, as he doesn't underestimate the adversary enough to take them off him, but the sentiment was there. "Clearly I need to check my eyesight, if the numerous devils I've been slaying over the centuries are starting to overlay everyday objects in my vision. It must have been trees I was cutting the past weeks then." Sarcasm. Lucifer noted. It must be affecting you more than I thought, for you to lose your ever-present politeness. A small archangel facing fallen and devils with sharp words came to Michael's mind. He chuckled. I wonder if Regel is being a bad influence on me, Michael thought with amusement. Lucifer tilted his head at the archangel's reaction. Michael, you do realize this whole thing wouldn't have happened if you could just return to heaven, right? The leader of the archangels stilled. He already knew in his gut, but thought there might have been another reason. If you just opened a portal, teleported, or found a gate in one of the many consecrated ground, you could have returned by now, Lucifer said with a smirk. But you can't, can you? You can't open a portal, it just feels difficult. Teleporting is out of the question, your power just doesn't seem to work right, sending you to places with demonic presences, and you almost can't seem to find a holy ground no matter how far you look. Surely you notice by now? Michael felt the box pulse in his arm, as he glared at his sibling. His gut feeling confirmed. His controls seemed to fracture just enough for a portal not to work correctly. Teleport would send him to places where devils or demons, beings filled with unholy energy or powers, such as vampires, and they would all instinctively chase after him, instinctively want Pandora's box, and I can't find a sacred ground because it's obscuring my sense of direction. Michael finished the thought. Far in the distance, Michael noted thousands of black spots heading toward him. Devils, demons of all kinds, all manner of dark beings that were chasing him for the past few days were circling toward his and Lucifer's location. So come on, Michael. Lucifer floated lower, extending his hand. Please don't make me a kinslayer today, he said kindly. Michael huffed for a moment, and closed his eyes. Damn you, Lucifer, and send a blazing wave of holy light from his whole body as he glared hatefully at the Satan. All 12 of his wings unfurled, shining with divine light. Lucifer had already flown back, a grin on his face and a laugh at his belly. Aya, there is that look. Honestly, will you ever not react like that? Lucifer let the laugh flow out of him. Michael knew Lucifer. He knew what his brother was really like. Lucifer understood how important and precious family bonds were to his angelic siblings, and had no qualms of using them in whichever way to his advantage. Always appearing kind, sweet and sympathetic, saying the right words, and drawing on the familial bonds and emotions the angels had toward him. And that's how he makes them fall before killing them. Yeah, we all do. Michael sighed, his power rising with furious pace, as the light shined out from him. Far away, the first wave of demonic beings fell, by the Archangel's initial release of his power. Because the difference between us is we're not failure as loyal sons or siblings. And that is what makes this so much fun for me, said Lucifer, smirking in return, releasing his 12 black wings. All of you have that small useless bit that wants to redeem me. And it's so easy to use it against you, to rile you up even when you know better. It never stops being so hilarious. He laughed out loud. And now we're here, right where it all ends. Because even if Father, he said the words in a mocking, disgust-filled tone, were to send you help, you'll still all die, because of that box ing with you, if nothing else. It would take a miracle to. Lucifer noticed a soft, gently falling feather between him and Michael. He looked around and there were hundreds of them. Remil! Lucifer bellowed, slashing with his sword as tiny hyper-focused and dense needles of light flew in a wave, each aimed at a single feather. Some hit, destroying them. Others failed, and the feathers shot electricity that connected each feather, growing in strength and forming a cage around the Satan, before showering him with holy lightning. Lucifer made an armor of light to absorb the blast, before flying straight at Michael. The feather in front of Michael glowed, and a blue great sword appeared in its place. Michael flew, grabbing the blade as it shined with an aura of divine light that could cut through anything. What? Lucifer shouted, as the blades clashed, and his sword broke. He had already dashed back with supernatural boosted speed, as he knew this would be a result of a clash with Duranel, a blade whose aura could even push back Pandora's box. Seductive whispers. So brother, shall we try this again? Michael glared. Why the hell is that sword here? Lucifer ignored the threatening tone and complained. I knew it wasn't taken to support you or be brought here. He looked up at the arriving female archangels with a sneer. So why is it here? Don't expect me to believe it's the Almighty's omniscience again. he said in a mocking tone. You are correct that the blade wasn't taken to reinforce any battlefield. Gabriel spoke with focus and harshness. It was to be given to Regel for his mission, but he decided we should have it instead, since Father called on all of us to come join Michael. Remiel said with a wide grin. I see. Michael smiled as he was side by side with his sisters. Even with an army of the damned and wicked soon to surround them, now he was sure of victory. I'll have to thank him when we all return to heaven. I'm sorry, did you say Regel? The Satan asked with incredulity. Okay, seriously, who is he? This is the second time this shit happens, so are you ready? Vivian asked, feeling tense at what she was about to do. Why it? Regel said after steeling his nerves. Okay, I'm going to pull. Vivian pulled back her hand with sudden haste. Ouchie, now, she said smiling, while holding one of Regel's feathers. Then her eyes widened in panic. I'm sorry, did it hurt really bad? Are you okay? Did I pull too hard? I wanted this to be over quick so you wouldn't be in pain, she said, as she hovered over the young Archangel, checking him over, and running her hand on his wing with a healing spell. It's fine. Really, I'm fine, Regel said with a sheepish smile. It's more like, the anticipation made me imagine the pain being worse than it actually was. It turned out to have been about the same as a needle prick. Actually more like a needle poke. He looked aside, blushing. Vivian was silent for a moment, before covering her mouth and giggling. Regel pouted. It's not that funny, it really is, Vivian said back, still smiling, to which Regel pouted like a petulant child. But since you've been so brave, I'll make some of that pizza you like. Yay, thank you. Regel smiled back brightly. Over the past 2 years, at least the time that passed in the Fey realm, Regel and Vivian had spent a lot of time working and interacting with each other. They had gotten close enough that saying sorry or thank you was no longer a factor when talking to each other. Vivian's Fey magic no longer responded to it, as within both their hearts, there was no desire for a debt to be incurred. Thus a Fey contract would never formed. Only their vow of betrothal and eventual marriage stayed present. Yes, first we forged the blade, and then food. Vivian held up the angelic glowing feather. All the studying and research will pay off. Hee 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 ha 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 ha. Vivi, maniacal laughter. Regel deadpanned with a know-it-all smug smile on his face. The Lady of the Lake coughed elegantly. Whatever could you be referring to? Yes, 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 why, yes, 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 yes. A panting, sweaty Vivian stood up, aroused excitement shining in her eyes. Finally, an equally sweaty and shirtless Regel panted, his unexpectedly muscle-defined torso glistening from the effort he exerted, stood up, arching his back, causing a crack. It's over. I have done it, she shouted, holding up the naked metal blade by the tang using a magical tongue. I have made the prototype of the perfect holy sword. Seriously? Regel, who had been working the forged flames, or rather made the forged flames, as he aided Vivian by heating the metal with holy fire, said with incredulity. You made it sound like finally today would be the day. You can't rush perfection, dear, Vivian said with a smirk, before she stilled, having realized what she just said. While the past 2 years have helped Vivian let down her hair around the Archangel, she still tends to be reserved in her open displays of affection. She would rather act like she just happened to be considerate, rather than because she intended to do so. Yeah, I guess you're right. Regel chuckled, and Vivian relaxed, as it seems the Archangel didn't notice her slip up. Then Regel walked behind the fairy, who was too distracted, looking at her finished blade. Darling, Eep. Vivian shook, yet thankfully, her discipline meant that she didn't drop the tongue holding the blade, with Regel being ready to intervene with telekinesis had she actually dropped anything. You, Vivian looked back with a blushing glare. While I know you're enthusiastic, I think we need to take a break, before continuing with the rest of the blade making. The near pouty glare continued. Also, you said it needs to be cooled slowly, between holy water and the Avalon's water, so we do have time for lunch, something we agree not to skip, since you do remember the near-week starvation, right? You said you wouldn't mention that again. Vivian hissed as her blush intensified. Yes, but you looked way too zealous about continuing, when you know better. So come on, put down the blade, Vivian, Regel said with a patient smile. I'm putting it down, because it does need to cool. Vivian did not sound childish. The blade was placed in a large cylinder, where holy water and Avalon's water were magically placed side by side. Vivian mentally debated on which type of water she should place the sword in, before settling on the Avalon's water. The moment the blade touched the water, the cylinder's magical effect began, making the blade float, as it slowly went into the center of the Avalon's water. Then the cylinder, slowly, ever so gently and slowly began to turn, causing the water to move, cooling and tempering the hot blade, before it was submerged in the holy water, and as the water moved with the blade floating in place, it would engulf with the Fey water again. I suppose we should take a bath first, then have lunch, Vivian said, subtly taking glances at Regel, that sweat running down his body. Yeah, a shower would be nice. It especially feels great after working hard on something, Regel said with a satisfied sigh. Ah, right, I still need to design and install that. Vivian noted as Regel had mentioned the concept of a shower before, but she had yet to try it. By the way, are you going to name the sword? I know it's a prototype, but I still feel it deserves a name, Regel said as he was heading out the door of the smithy. Of course, it is Caleb Fulch, Vivian said with her head held high with pride. Regel smiled at the name, having an actual confirmation that yes, it really was Vivian in this world, really was the one to make that sword. Then a thought came to his mind. Cool, say how about we skip on making lunch, and go on a lunch date in the human world instead? Clang. 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 Vivian accidentally tripped over some bits of armor, metal parts, and other projects laying around. Hum, hum, hum. In an isolated and most guarded place in the underworld, there was a Gothic castle shaped like a box. The castle was kilometers wide, and was fortified by hundreds of thousands of devils, with millions more coming out of it each day. In the center of the Iron Cube castle was a mile-wide magic circle. In the middle of the mile-wide magic circle there was a lake. At the edge of that lake was a beautiful woman lying on the ground, with one arm lazily dipped in the water, as she hummed a song to herself. The woman embodied the beauty of simple elegance. Her modest body looked average compared to a supernatural being, but attractive nonetheless. Her face held a small smile, and her eyes held nothing but melancholy. The water was glowing with shiny bright purple color that gave off a nauseating and dreadful aura. Only a single spot in the lake was not clear, and it was the one the woman's arm was in, due to the gallons of blood that flows in the lake from her open wrist. Great Mother, one of the Lucifuge devils assigned to this important vessel, announced herself promptly. Oh, hello my child, why would you talk to me? The woman could be no one else, but the mother of devils, Lilith. The Lucifuge devil tried to appear stoic, but couldn't help the contempt that appeared on her face. This woman, Lilith, was the reason the devil race exists, yet as always she appeared so weak, so submissive, so pathetic. For a race that was bred for war, and had the belief that weakness was a sin for their kind carved into their soul, the existence of Lilith was a paradoxical one. Gratitude and awe when afar, contempt and disgust when near her. They wondered how could she be happy to do nothing, but bleed to birth them for years on end, with nothing but a smile on her face. This human who was of so importance to them, was nothing but a pet for their lord. Someone so pitiful was so important. Lord Lucifer has called for you, Lucifuge devil informed her. He says he needs your help. Beloved is calling for me. She immediately stood up, her previously melancholic eyes coming to life, her wrist healed as if it's never been cut, and her smile was one of obsession. And above all, she so disturbingly would jump to answer at the mere mention of Lucifer's name. Yes, he said that the container to the last pure shard of 666 was found, and that you are, oh, my beloved Hello, and of course he knew he could depend on me. That's right, only I could hold it. Lilith spoke in rapid cheerfulness, startling the Lucifuge devil. Yes, we were told to escort. Yes, I know. I'll go right away. I won't let Hello's masterpiece be left incomplete. And then he'll praise me, and love me, and love me, and love me. Lilith began to speak faster, and her magical energy spiked. Yes. The Lucifuge devil shouted in frustration at not being given the chance to get a word in. So we need to stop wasting time, ye useless breeding, and get to Lord Lucifer's. You're absolutely right, my child, Lilith shouted with a devilish grin, as a portal of dark shadows appeared in front of her, and she stepped through it. The castle of Lilith was empty of its most important resident. For a long while, months even, it would continue to produce devils from the blood left behind, if the progenitor were to return alive, which the guards assigned to her were supposed to make sure of, even at the cost of their souls. And none of the devil guards got the chance to leave with her, as none expected her to teleport, or had ever seen her so much as cast a spell in the millenniums they have observed her. The Lucifuge devil's face was bereft of all blood. I lost the mother of devils. Ahoo. So what do you think? Beautiful, just as the first time I saw one, Regel said, viewing a newly existent soul. Right after Regel and Vivian had cleaned up and got ready to head to the human world, a fairy messenger arrived, saying Lady Vivian is to give another presentation to the Winter Court. Meaning, the Winter Queen wants to show her off to brag about something again. Grumbling under her glamour, Vivian told Regel that they would have their date right after she got back, then took a rondite and left. Right afterward, God called Regel to heaven so he would meet up with his siblings, before taking him to the Sea of Souls for another lesson. It was to Regel's shock that 4 years had passed in the human world, and thus his absence was far longer for his siblings than their absence was for him. When Regel asked his father why he allowed time to pass in such manner this time, he was met with only a mysterious smile, and a reply that left him annoyed. I'm just moving the plot along a bit, because that reply told him nothing. Then Regel was distracted by the shiny that was the Aqua Doctrine. Can you see what that soul is made up of? Regel focused on the soul in front of him, trying to look underneath its surface layer, except there wasn't exactly an underneath, it was just there. That was all there is. I dunno. He looked back to this father, to see him waiting with smile of knowing patience. Regel thought about it some more. What type of soul is this? Human. Regel looked to the other souls around them. He couldn't tell the difference. Father, how can you tell? He asked. When you spend enough time here, you get a hunch for these things. Father said with a small chuckle. Regel tilted his head in confusion. Look toward it again. What is that soul trying to do? Regel looked and focused, feeling his father's presences guide him. It's straying to go somewhere. The human world so it can be born? Regel looked to this father in excitement. His father nodded. Let's follow it. The soul started to move, or rather Regel began to notice that time seemed to be moving again, never realizing it had stopped in the first place. Rather than the Almighty and his Archangel move, it seemed as if the scenery was moving for them. God and Regel followed the soul as it traveled from the astral sphere, going through several spiritual worlds, before finally reaching the material one. The moment God and Regel appeared following the soul in the human world, everything froze. Or rather, time stopped again. Did you notice anything in that trip? It seemed to move at random. Also, did we just pass by the Norse spirit world? Regel asked as he looked back, but he already couldn't see the path they took. Something odd I saw was that, when it pasted those spirit worlds, some it vibrated with, while others it wasn't reactive to. He tried to explain. Why? A mix of fate and instinct, explained God. Souls tend to pass through multiple spirit worlds, and then in a sense, resonate with the ones that feel correct to them. Whether this happens because they will be born to parents that follow the Norse pantheon like this one, or they will then find parents of the Norse following to be born to, is a chicken or the egg question. Right. Regel nodded, accepting the answer, not bothering to find out which was the reason for the soul's preference to avoid the headache. Fate and instinct, got it. Now watch what happens when it's now in the material world. Time moved less than a microsecond. Or rather less than any amount of perceivable time. Regel watched as the soul transformed from one whole object to developing multiple inner components. Then time stopped again. The soul now had multiple inner components. Sometimes 1 or 2 or 4. It didn't seem consistent. Regel looked around to confirm that time had stopped. Seeing people and animals frozen in place showed that it was. Okay, how is it doing that? What's the problem? God asked with an amused smile. Regel pouted with a huff. How many parts does it have? Is it 3, 5, or 9? Yes. The Creator smirked. I really need to stop asking questions with multiple answers. Regel sighed, and chuckled before smiling. God laughed as well before continuing. The number isn't important. So much as the fact that even with multiple parts, the soul is still one and whole. So even with multiple parts, it's still one soul. Like Regel tried to think of an example. One part of a car, a tire, isn't the car, but all the parts together is. Correct. God smiled, and Regel smiled back in pride at figuring out the correct answer. Now, let's look at what each part is, and its function. God began pointing out the components of the soul, and Regel listened intently. See that's the will, the spark of being and life. The force that pushes life to grow and flourish. Wait, isn't that key or Tukey in this universe? Regel asked in excitement. Correct. God replied. See how it pulses inward, as if waiting for something. Yeah, it's actual kinda small, but really dense. And the vibrations, why is it doing that? Also, it kinda feels incomplete. Regel asked. Let's put a pin in that, and return to it at the end. Regel huffed as now he's being left in suspense. Next we have this energy here. Notice how it's the other side of Tukey. Regel observed how that energy acted. It's constantly reaching outward, trying to interact with nature and the world. That's magical energy, isn't it? He looked back to his father expectantly. Yes, it is, God said and waited, but Regel blinked as a thought came to him. If it's the other side of Tukey, of life force, then why do people think the two are different things? Are you right hand and left hand separate? Yeah? Would you normally confuse the two? Of course not. Are they, however, not both hands and also belong to you? Of course they are. Regel put his hands up, gesturing with incredulity that such a concept was in question. How can anyone mistake that? It is one of the many illusions of life. Separations. The scenery around them changed, and Regel now saw the continent of Europe from above. In the next moment, he could see two cities side by the side, that he saw humans fight each other. It looked like between different people. Then the scenery changed again. It was one city this time, and the two sides fighting were the same people. I see. Regel sighed. They were all humans, but saw each other as different. Saw even difference if there were none, or made difference to have something to fight about. Of course, the illusions people tell themselves would extend to how they view their own souls. Separations, huh? Well, it's important to know that the separation is an illusion, but when looking at the small picture, the boundaries do have a function. He explained, which is having a reason. Without that, the will cannot catalyze and move forward. Regel nodded. He remained silent for a while, just taking in that information. The line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being, right? Regel quoted. Oh, that's what we're gonna talk about next. The Creator said. Wait, that's an actual thing. Regel exclaimed. Not exactly evil, but something necessary all the same. You'll see, look here. God said, almost in anticipation of his son's reaction. That's the mind? Regel said, at the part his father was pointing to. The psyche, actually. The mind would be more like the spiritual hardware containing everything that make the person a person, while the psyche is the software that is what makes a person a person. Okay, first, why does it look like a 4D chessboard? The All Might remained silent, simply raising an eyebrow in amusement, and waiting for his son to continue. Or rather, it's like, why does it have two sides? Or like a lean that shows it has two sides, while it's actually one whole thing? Regel pointed out, becoming more animated and confused. Also, why does it seem like a part of it, isn't inside the soul? Like an external psyche is outside of it, but also connected to it. And why does it have a shadow? Regel then stopped and stilled for a second, just blinking at the soul. How the heck can a soul have a shadow? Regel bent down to look under the soul, and wave a hand above it. There's no light to cast a shadow? How can a non-material thing have a shadow? He looked back toward God, separating his hands in confusion, his jaw open in an expression of complete disbelief. God laughed. I'm serious. Yes, I heard you, son. God looked back to Regel and began explaining. You are familiar with the concept of yin and yang, correct? Regel nodded rapidly. That's how the mind is divided. Positive and negative. Submissiveness and aggression. Masculine and feminine, and do note I said masculine and feminine, not male and female. Traits doesn't equal. Got it. Regel nodded, focused on his father's lecture. Simply put, all people have a mix of traits, sometimes opposite traits. Why they develop and manifest depends on factors such as the parents, the environment one grows up in, the method that mind developed to react to external stimuli to ensure survival, instinctive preference, genetics, all of the things that make you who you are, from your soul, fate, where you were born, to who you were born to the lessons you learned growing up, the habits you took up, all of it builds up your psyche and develops who you are. At the moment the psyche there is empty, but ready to be filled up by information from everything it will experience, then develop an ego based off of that. Wait, genetics are a factor? Regel was taken aback. Remember that was a factor in the makeup of a person. I'll get to that in a bit. The ego is important and needed in that it helps you focus on the tasks at hand, the thing you are doing and plan to do. The problem is that, well, it talks too much. You know people that live in their own head? They focus too much on their own experiences, get tunnel-visioned, and to miss out on the world around them. That's why, as you grow older, it's important to learn to disconnect from the ego, treating it as a tool that you know when to turn on and off, rather than let it rule you. All right, Regel said patiently. As you saw, the psyche seems to connect to a field outside of it. That field isn't real in a physical or spiritual sense. It might be better to think of it as a metaphor made manifest. Have you ever seen someone overcome with rage say they weren't themselves? Isn't that just poor anger management? Correct. However, emotions are complex. Not everything we feel is always our own, but rather an idea that possesses us. Possess? Regel asked bug-eyed. Yes, I know what the word tends to refer to, but in this case it is strictly non-demonic. The Creator explained. Simply put, the collective psychic field is made up of the imprints of human memory on the world, and it's what influences the behavioral patterns of people. It's where things like character archetypes emerge. They come from the memories of the actions humanity took to survive to the current day and into the future. If someone affects that field, would they be able to control all of humanity? Regel asked in alarm. No, they can't. How come? Why? Because it's not real. As I said, it's a metaphor. It's not real. You can't interact with it. But we're literally seeing it being part of the soul. Regel pointed with both hands at the soul. Just because something is not real, doesn't mean it can't affect you. What? Regel raised and lowered his arms, like he wanted to pull at his hair, but thought better of it. Illusions aren't real, but can affect you. Same thing in this case. My head is starting to hurt. Welcome to Souls 101. Same as Time Travel 101. If you don't get a headache, you're not doing it right. Regel looked with bafflement at his grinning father. Okay, Regel said, holding his head. And the shadow? Oh, that? It's anything that you repress that's a part of you, that you don't acknowledge as a part of you, but need to do so, in order to spiritually grow as a person. God said nonchalantly. As a child you don't have it, but it fills up and grows as you grow. Oh, just that. So easy. How simple. Regel just looked at his father in crazed disbelief. He held up that expression for a while before he and his father broke their staring contest and laughed it off. After a while the two calmed down, and a serious mood was in the air. Now, about genetics. God paused, placed a hand on Regel's shoulder and looked him in the eyes. It's important for you to remember this. Regardless of the conditions, your life is your life, and no matter how bad the choices you have to make are, the choice you make is yours and yours alone, even if you think you are forced into it. Even if you choose to do nothing, that is still a choice. Okay? Regel tilted his head. Genetics are nothing more and nothing less than your starting conditions. For clarification, your family status at birth is also part of your starting conditions. Okay, so like video games starting stats, with plus or minus modifiers. Regel said. Yes, but then, what about people born with genetic diseases or deformed? Regel looked away. He would never imply that God's creations were a mistake, but, now we get to the crux of free will. God spread his arms dramatically. What? Regel tilted his head at the non sequitur. As I said, your life is your life. The choices you make are yours, but they also aren't yours alone. Regel listened with focused intent. When you make a choice, it doesn't just affect you, and you alone. It ripples out into the world and impacts those around you, and from them those around them, and further away from you. That's why, when you are born, you don't inherit just your parents' wealth, but also their choices. Which also includes their blood, and all it contains. But what about cell mutations? Regel struggled with that reasoning. It didn't sound right. It didn't sound fair. Outside of curses, supernatural meddling, or one or both parents accidentally interacting with some energy field without knowing, or them damaging their own life force and that being passed down to their children. Life force is made in part from the soul's own and the living parents. Regel's eyes widened as he muttered to himself. God sighed and looked at Regel with an unkind look. A firm look that made the Archangel look away. Look at me, Regel, he said softly, and Regel complied. Outside of those circumstances, sometime by random happenstance, nature, life shows an ugly side of itself, and a human would be born with a defect outside of anyone's control, not yours. Regel argued. No, God agreed. And yet I would still let it happen, because I would not take away their choice in how a person or others around them will face that life. Some people are born in bodies that Regel wanted to hold back his words, but his nature to tell the truth didn't give him a filter with his emotions heightened. They can't live in. No one has a choice in that. It's not right. It can either be a life they learn to be content and satisfied with despite their birth, or they can challenge that they can rise to face, not allowing them to hold them back. God replied. They can even go a step further and find a way to fix that problem, and by doing so becoming a hero that rises up all of humanity higher. Not everyone has a strong will like that. Regel cried out, almost feeling the betrayed that God wasn't always forever kind. Not everyone can just overcome pain like that. Yeah, that is a norm. God agreed. However, norms can change. So do standard. When people learn that something once thought impossible can be done, they all rise up knowing the impossible is no longer so, and can be done. If it becomes the norm to face suffering and overcome it, using it as a stepping stone to better oneself, then disadvantages like genetic diseases wouldn't matter anymore. They will be merely another challenge for someone to beat, but until that happens, people will continue to suffer. It's not fair, the Archangel shouted. When were you under the impression that life was meant to be fair? God rebuked Regel's statement. That's bullshit. You're here. You're real. People pray to you, and Regel never noticed that his wings flickered black. And if they pray to me, I will provide them the answer. Either by pointing them in the direction of healing or a cure, or by inspiring them to create a solution for themselves. Even those who do not pray to me, but mere have a hope and a will to face the challenges of life, will have aid from me, even if they never know it. But Regel looked down, tears falling down his face. What about when you die? His voice was a whisper, and his wings were shining white again. Unlike what he expected, God laughed, making the Archangel snap up to look toward his father. Die, he says. My son, God patted Regel's shoulder, the action this time a comforting one. When you get to where I am, you'll realize that life and death are such elementary concepts. Huh! Regel blinked back in confusion. As you notice, the soul is now made of internal components, but it's also not complete as it once was. God said, bringing them back the subject they were original here for. Yeah? Regel said slowly, unsure of this sudden change in their conversation. Currently, it's missing two things. Let's go see it acquire them. God placed an arm around Regel's shoulder, to which the little Archangel leaned into the embrace, holding on to their father. The scenery changed again, a hut in a Saxon village. A woman working on leather making. The soul entered where her womb was placed. The woman didn't notice a thing. God waved his hand, and the scenery shifted. It was still the same place, but now only in the spiritual view of things. Regel saw the soul's Tuki gain its second half and shined even brighter, before quieting down and becoming dormant. He saw a missing gap in the soul be filled. It was the link between soul and body, even if the body was just a zygote at the moment. However, there was still one missing piece in the soul left. Let's speed up things a bit. Time shifted, and Regel and his father were 9 months in the future. The woman had given birth. The man, her husband, held the boy proudly. Like we agreed? The man asked his wife, and mother of his child, with a happy wide grin. Yes, she smiled back through her exhaustion. His name will be Madig. Our little brave warrior. The man laughed, and held his child up high in pride. Regel saw the final empty place in the soul be filled up with the name. He recalled what Vivian had said about name and their importance, that they were labels to definite a person. It wasn't the person themselves, but like how a voodoo doll wasn't the person it curses, the sympathetic link between the doll and the person lets it affect the person. That's why if someone holds a person's name, through a sympathetic link, they control that person through that label. So, Regel started talking, having regained his calm and will. Regardless of your conditions, you still have to make a choice, and it is wholly yours, he said with resignation. I feel like that lesson is something I already know. He gave a tired chuckle, and yet it did hit as profoundly as this time. Or rather, you forgot the importance of the lesson and needed to be reminded, his father said, for the first time mentioning a lesson Regel knew from his past life. Regel sighed and looked away. Regel, the Creator, let go of his son to place his hands on his shoulder. This time, the gesture felt like one of safety. I know you like to think this life is a fresh start, but you remember the past one. You wouldn't be who you are without it. It's not a new beginning, but a continuation. A new chapter. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't need to be. My old life never has to be mentioned ever in this one. To am a new person. Regel tried to say there was nothing of importance or of value in that old life, only to find he couldn't. It would have been a lie. I was just an average person who passively existed. Here, I'm actually living. This life is important. There is no such thing as an unimportant life. That includes your past one, God said, and Regel looked away. The father stood back up and looked down on his son kindly, yet the Archangel couldn't meet his gaze out of shame. Come on, time to go home. And to the correct point on the timeline too. God extended his hand, and Regel took it. Oh, and here. He gave Regel a pouch. Regel looked inside to see some coins. An allowance? You do have a date. The moment Regel returned to the cottage at the bottom of the lake, Vivian stormed into the house, huffing in annoyance. She threw a rondite aside, which made a beautiful spinning through the air and embedding itself into the wall, perfectly perpendicular. Welcome home. Regel was cut off by Vivian hugging him and snuggling him tightly. Yep, you're here. You're okay, I'm okay. He lightly patted her back. After a few moments of Vivian taking in Regel's presence, his scent, his warmth, she let go and looked at the Archangel intently. We're going on that date. Now, Lord Lucifer. Ah, yes, you Lucifuge. Where's the doll? In her excitement to meet you, the Great Mother left immediately all on her own. She used magic. We didn't know she could do that. She had never done that before. Lucifer sighed, and the female Lucifuge thought her life was about to end. This is my fault. Yeah, honestly, so rarely do I call on the doll, that I forget how erratic she can be. It's fine, she's tough enough that we don't have to worry about her destruction. You Lucifuge. Yes, my lord. The female Lucifuge shouted in hope, relief and awe at her Satan's mercy. She was ready to act out anything he wished right now. Gather up all the members of your clan. I'll tell you the plan to find and get back that doll. Yes, Lord Lucifer. Right away. She shouted and flew with all her might to complete her task. Shame, Lucifer said to himself. Why is that Satan Lucifer? Asked one of the braver generals nearby. Lucifer recalled he was Baal, one of his favorites. I'll have to genocide the Lucifuge clan and restart it all over again. Lucifer said casually, as if a favorited collection became boring to him. And this was such a good batch too. I need to make the next one a bit smarter, or maybe more tactful. None of the generals spoke. They said nothing, and could say nothing. Fear was their being, yet they showed none of it. This was to be expected. This was the father of devils, and they were his creations to shape as he willed. And they can never afford to disappoint or bore him, or the dice will roll their number. And that's why Kaeldfalch isn't the perfect holy sword just yet. It needs someone who has the holy attribute to wield it, and a great amount too. No, the perfect holy sword need to be something that can be wielded by anyone, and its strength would only shine in the hands of the worthy, who are hardworking and skilled. Vivian excitedly rambled while she and Regel walked in town, where a festival was taking place. The fairy was pointedly not talking about her attendance in the winter court, and Regel let her de-stress by talking about her favorite hobby. The town they were in was a lively one. The people looked happy and not in fearful living conditions. Of course, Kaled Fulch abilities should be. Regel, are you listening to me? Vivian asked in annoyance. The Archangel was usually an avid listener, and was even fun to talk on this topic with, as he showed as much interest in sword making as her. He pointed to a forest leading out of town, and right at its edges was a woman arguing with a snake. A normal garden snake. Oh, Vivian focused on the woman, before her expression fell to one of sympathy. The poor dear, it seems she's touched in the head. Touched? Regel asked. You know, those whose mind simply doesn't function right. Madness, you know. Illness of the mind. It's not easy to fix unless it's a magical ailment. Each case require a specific solution. Vivian said, hoping that Regel would let the topic go, but knowing he would want to help anyone in his sight. It was in his nature, and one that endeared him to her, but in this case, nothing can be done. Or rather something can, but it would take far too much time and effort than is reasonable. I think I might be able to do something. Regel began walking toward the woman. Vivian blinked in surprise, but followed along. Once they were in range of the black-haired elegant beauty, she took notice of them. Halt! Who may you be? She said, pointing at them with the hand holding the snake. For some reason, Regel could almost imagine the distress on the poor creature's face, as if it didn't know what's happening or why. Hello, I am Regel began, only to be cut off. Ah! I see you're one of his champions of light, come here to slay me. But regardless of who you are no match for my beloved, she said, pushing the helpless snake forward. Yes, he was cheating on me with another snake, which I quickly killed and destroyed her soul, but I forgive him, for beloved is beloved, it's not his fault he's so beautiful. She gushed. Regel and Vivian looked at each other, then back at the woman. Excuse me? Sorry about this, Regel said as he closed in on the woman, for you see, beloved is my champion, the sat. Regel cupped the woman's head with one hand, and began the healing magic Raphael showed him. Normally this would be outside his abilities, but being able to now see the soul in more detail now, meant he could see the woman's psyche and how messed up it is. This fracture, someone did this to her. Now that he could see her mind up close, Regel could see and feel the finely tuned threads of magic that caused this damage. With his mind working at superhuman speed, and the references he had to healthy minds, along with his control, and the natural healing affinity holy power has, Regel began to reform her mind at great haste and precision. While doing so, Regel noticed the woman's soul was much darker than the average person. He speculated that it might have been caused her actions while being insane, and hoped with this she can start healing her soul and karma. It's not fair her soul is darker because of her actions while insane. But life isn't meant to be fair, right? He thought with bitterness. After a few moments, the final piece was in place, and the woman's mind was whole again. Regel stepped back, the woman fell to her knee, almost asleep. The snake quickly escaped and got away. The woman blinked a few times, before looking at her hands in recognition. She looked around her, before looking up at the Archangel and Fairy. Did you save me? She asked with hesitant confusion. I did nothing. You owe your gratitude to him, Vivian politely said. The woman focused on Vivian before her eyes widened. You're one of the fair folk, Vivian raised an eyebrow in interest. You have dealt enough with us to recognize us on sight. Eyes. She looked down, before looking back up with determination in her eyes. You who saved me, what manner of divine being are you? Regel and Vivian looked at each other in suspicion. Please, I mean you no harm. I am a witch of some measure of power. You can call me Lily. I simply wish to know my savior, for I hope you might accept my being a burden a bit, and aid me further. She pleaded. Vivian wanted to stop Regel and pull him away. She felt unease for no reason she can see, yet still wanted to get away from this so-called witch. My name is Regel, I'm a messenger of the Lord. Regel introduced himself with a soft, gentle tone. Lily's eyes lit up. Oh, thank God! She cried as she stood up. While I know that I'm damned, I hope that at least I can repent by telling one of his angels this. What? Regel was startled and confused by her response. For many years I had been under the control of devils. I had no choice in the matter, yet thankfully they messed up in ordering me and I escape. Please, quickly, you have to go stop them. Lily moved to Regel and held his hands in hers, and she begged him. Hey. Vivian called out under her glamour, while her glamour self regally said, calm yourself. Speak with clarity. The devil's ploy must be stopped. Lily said in near hysteria. They wished to bring out Armageddon itself. Regel and Vivian stilled at her exclamation. They want to unleash the beast of the end. Please stop them, Lord Regel. How much further? Vivian asked curtly. Thanks to Lord Regel's flight, and Lady Lilith's magic, it should be no more than 3 days till we reach Orkney, and find the container. Lily said cheerfully. Vivian grumbles as Lily had been carried in Regel's arms while he flew, while she had to content with holding onto him from his back. The Archangel was apparently tired of the long flights carrying them, thus the trio would take rests walking periodically. Regel, however, didn't want to say he was tired mentally, not physically, as Vivian's pointed stares and Lily's inquiring questions were taking a toll on him. How about we rest here for the night? Regel suggested. Seeing that the sun was setting, the fairy and the witch agreed, and the trio began setting up camp. After finishing their meal, the group sat around the fire, with Vivian sitting next to Regel. At first, Lily sat facing the duo, before moving till she sat on the other side of Regel. Yeah! The two of you are engaged. Lily squealed in happiness, as she looked from fairy to the angel in excitement. Yes. Yes, we are. Vivian said with a prideful smile, trying not to seem like she's looking down on the witch, and telling her to mind her place. Why yes, sorry again that we had to cut our date short, Lilith. Regel said, hoping to lean away from the two women and failing. Have no worries. Vivian said neutrally. It bothered her that throughout the trip Regel would find reasons apologize, and forced a fake contract between them, to his massive disadvantage thus far. She wasn't sure why. He didn't say anything to indicate any reason for doing so. He just gave her a massive power over him for some reason. Although with the river water he gave her, in a weakly structured flask, only holding on due to magic, she had an idea. The river water is to be used as a medium for her escape, and then the dead bond to be used to pull him to her side. An escape method in case the apocalypse beast was released, and they needed to run away safely from it. But then why not share this method with Lily? Vivian does realize that she was acting too jealous, to a girl that was just grateful for what her betrothed had done to her. And while she did have her odd doubts about the girl, she never lied. So what suspicions do you have of her, Regel? And why do you continue on this so-called journey to assist her if you doubt her words? She knew the reason. Lily had not lied, so Regel would help her. Yet that didn't help the uneasiness and hear her annoyance at how clingy the woman was being with her Archangel. Oh! You fought a dragon just to meet Lady Lilith. To think your love could blossom to such extent. Lily sighed with a wistful tone. That's not what I said happened. Regel said with an uncomfortable smile. Ahem. Vivian announced herself, as she had stood up, and moved till she was between the witch and the angel, then forced her way to sit between them. So, Miss Lily, why don't you tell us about yourself? Ah, well, I am a Lily looked aside with a sorrowful smile. Just a stupid girl who fell in love. I left my first husband for him, but then I made a mistake out of jealousy, and a devil took me to hell. She chuckled pitifully. Every day was nothing but torture, yet in my mind it was bliss. I suppose the devils that torturing me didn't realize that, so that was at least a solace I had. Vivian did not expect this, and looked at Regel in quiet panic. It's okay now. You're no longer there. Slowly Vivian placed an arm around the witch. You're safe here. With us, and your bravery in facing and wanting to foil the plot of the devils is worth songs over. Lily cried and hugged Vivian, to which the fairies internally panicked more, while trying to comfort the girl going through a hard time. For a long while Lily cried, her tears fall and fall till she had none left. It was as if all her internalized pain was let out, and she was left with exhaustion that put her to sleep. Vivian carried the witch, placing her opposite to Regel, so she would be in their sight, and covered her with a blanket, before returning back to her Archangel's side. Poor dear, Vivian said in sympathy. Yeah, Regel said with a tired expression of his own, as he stared into the fire. What is it, Regel? Vivian said slowly, holding his hand into her own. Is something ailing you? Is there a reason you are fearful enough to make a fey debt with me? The words were left unsaid, but the feeling remained. I'm anxious about the timing of all this, he said. Anxious? Yeah, while you were called to the court, I was summoned and talked with Father about a few topics. That left me thinking a lot things. He tried to explain without telling her the thought that wormed its way into his mind. Things? You are usually far more descriptive than that, Vivian said in a light-hearted tone. Yeah, Regel chuckled. I guess I'm not at my best at the moment. Sorry. The debt increase. Vivian frowned. I'm not sure if it's just my emotions running wild, letting me see things that aren't there, or if it's actually my correct intuition, but he smiled gently at the lake fairy and rubbed her hand with his thumb. Think of it as insurance if things don't turn out well in Orkney. As I said before, if it's you, I don't mind being in your debt. Very well. Vivian looked away, not wanting him to see how red her face had gotten. Also, Regel said, narrowing his eyes at the fire. Yes? Vivian looked back, curious at the serious tone her Archangel used. Can you go back and finish your project? I have a feeling it might be needed. Lily woke up screaming in a panic, but Regel was immediately at her side, helping her calm down. It's okay, it's okay. You're safe, I'm here, Regel said, as Lily held onto to him, crying in his shoulder. Regel calmly rubbed her back and patted her head, trying to focus on comforting her and not his own uneasiness. He was alone with Lily, whom for some reason, a small minor part of him felt wary of her, while the rest of him felt sympathy. Vivian was back at her home putting the pieces of the sword together to complete it. Mostly, though, it's that God had been silent when Regel prayed to him this morning. He had a feeling it was his father giving him some space, which he was grateful for, yet disliked all the same. Was Father ashamed to not solving every tragedy, or did he just not want to use his great task with the beast as an excuse for not saving every human from pain and suffering? Regel prayed and thought on this topic all sunrise. Maybe the truly random misfortunes outside of any supernatural influence are statistically so minor that it's not a big deal. Nope. Can't even believe that if I tried. Besides, if humanity became a space-faring civilization, that statistic would be a colossal number. So what's the solution? Regel thought about it, before mentally throwing up his hands, and deciding to go with the simple answer. Help humanity develop gene editing by the 20th century to fix all genetic problems. Let them all unlock Tukey so they don't die from accidents, and something for other problems I can't think about now. I'll figure the rest as I go along. There. Solution done. Suck it, life. He knew it was a petulant, unrefined thought, but he held on to it, and forced himself to feel optimistic through it. After waking up, and tending to the recently cured witch, Regel and her began their flight toward the kingdom of Orkney. Is Lady Ella not joining us? Lily asked as she held on to his neck. It's fine, Regel reassured her. She'll meet us along the way. It's just in the face of the devils we are likely to face, we might need some protection, like a fey magic armor. Lily asked in excitement. Yes. Regel smiled, not elaborating further. You the two of you are really close, aren't you, Lord Regel? Lily commented. It's just Lily seemed to struggle for a moment, before looking at her saver with resolve. Fae tend to be tricky. They can't lie, but it doesn't mean they tell the truth. Lady Ella seems kind, yet she doesn't use her real name with Lord Regel, and she keeps letting you place yourself further and further into her debt. Regel raised an eyebrow. Apologizing to a fae places you in her debt. I'm sorry if you didn't know that, Lily said with sorrowful eyes, at giving the bad news. It's fine. Regel smiled back nonchalantly. We tend to settle our debt right away. Once we're done here and back home, she'll extract the debt from me thoroughly. Regel looked as innocent as possible while saying that. Thoroughly. Why you and her? You Lily started to blush. Yeah, it's really hard have to work and sweat every day. It's just back killing. Regel sighed and shook his head. Awa wah 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 wah. Lily was completely lost for words and started babbling incoherently. I mean, the forge is just exhausting work, you know. Lily grew quiet. Something wrong, Lily? Slap. Lord Regel is a fallen in disguise. I'm sorry. I'm really, really sorry. Please punish me and cut my arm for daring to harm an angel of the Lord. Lily shouted. It's fine, it's fine. Regel, cheek still imprinted with Lily's hand, laughed off her reaction. It seemed like a fun joke to play. Really, I'm the one at fault here. The two had landed after their argument, when the sun started to set, all while Lily was apologizing. Absolutely not. Lord Regel was so kind to me. I'm the one who jumped to conclusions. Lily look away in shame, as she tried to come up with something make it up to the Archangel. Look, we both made a mistake. How about we acknowledge our fault, forgive each other, and move on? Regel extended his hand to Lily, who was next to him. Lily smiled and shook Regel's hand. Thank you, Lord Regel. The two sat quietly next to each other, just talking about innate topics, to pass the time, eating dinner, and staring at the fire or forest in the quiet moments. Lord Regel, there's something I want to tell you, Lily said while nervousness radiated from her. Yeah? Regel looked toward her. My name isn't actually Lily, she said with a determined look, meeting Regel's gaze. Yeah, I know. Lily blinked and tilted her head. I'm familiar with how people that don't want to give their name to a fae introduce themselves. Yes, but my real name, she met the Archangel's eyes and smiled, the shadows from the fire obscuring her expression. I am Lilith, the first woman. Regel's eyes widened, and her story had a new meaning in his mind now. Regel stood up. You're Lilith. Yes, her voice sounded resigned and had something else. Fear? Wanting to move and run? Regel moved toward the first human woman, who faced him bravely, expecting him to lash out at her, only to be shocked when he hugged her. I'm so very sorry that we couldn't rescue you. He pulled back only to see complete disbelief on Lilith's face. You must have been in the underworld for so long. I'm sorry we couldn't bring you back, but I am so glad to have met you. To have helped you save yourself. Lilith's jaw was left open, as she blinked at the Archangel's reaction. You don't know? Know what? Lilith blinked, and Regel moved back to sit next to her. I don't deserve to be saved, she finally said. There's no such thing. He tried to tell her only for her to shake her head. No, I really don't deserve to be saved. I defied God, I left Adam, she looked down in shame. I followed the devil into hell, she whispered. The feeling in Regel's chest returned, yet he pushed it aside to focus on helping the person right in front of him. Hey, she placed a hand on her shoulder, and she looked at him pleading. He couldn't justify her past, but he could speak to her of her future. We can't change the things we've done. But you are here, right now in this present. That's the only time redemption can start. It's why it's a gift. Lilith stared at Regel with incredulity for a long while. Enough to Regel to take his hand off her shoulder from how awkward the gesture became. Then Lilith laughed. Ha 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 ha. What? Regel said in mock indignity. That wordplay, she took a moment to breath. I've never, ha 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 ha. Well, I'm not cheering you up anymore. Regel pouted with a huff and looked away. I'm so RRY, I'm so RRY. Lilith said, laughing through her tears. For a long time, after I left the garden, I was rejected by the other angels. They never could harm me, but they never wanted to be around me either. After the moment of levity passed, the two sat around the fire, with Lilith speaking in a solemn mood. At that time, only Lucifer was there for me, giving me a place to belong. Regel silently listened to her. Do you know why I was kicked out? She asked, curiosity clear in her tone. I know the story, but not the details. Adam and I were meant to be equal, but he never saw it that way. Lilith said, dejected. Because you wouldn't have missionary? Asked Regel. Lilith's jaw dropped as she went bug-eyed. Ha 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 ha. Is that what the church says? Ha 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 ha. Regel smiled as she kept laughing for a while, before composing herself once more. No, she said, smiling, her shoulders shaking a bit, before she calmed down again to continue. To be equal to someone, especially someone with whom you are meant to be husband and wife, means they should love you as you love them, right? Regel stayed quiet, then nodded when she didn't continue. But Adama didn't love me. He didn't because I never submitted. She looked aside, and her tone felt heavy, like she was telling this story for the 1000th time, still trying to make herself believe it. I didn't submit, so he didn't love me, chase after me to bring me back. Fight for me, she said under her breath. Regel could see the hurt she was under, remembering her past. I mean, Lilith continued, now in an animated tone. Adam was pretty boring, you know. Oh God, please no. There was no answer. Please don't let me sit here while a woman shit-talks her first boyfriend. Heaven remained silent. He always looked bored with everything. Literally, we were in the Garden of Eden, the first paradise and utopia, and he never looked interested. It was like he was just going along with the flow, not caring about anything. He never acted excited, curious, sad, anger. Had never even smiled at me. He only did for her. Lilith spat out, because she was more subservient. And then they say she was the one whom he tried as an equal. The one he loved. It didn't need to be said who was the one the first woman was talking about. Lilith had a bitter smile on her face. You know, she said in a loud voice. I heard when the church and others like them say about what Adam said to God after I left, sovereign of the universe. The woman you gave me has run away. She spread her arms and deepened her voice in a grandiose fashion, which inadvertently made Regel chuckle. I may not have been there, but I'd bet you anything his reaction was, God, she left. Lilith acted out with a dull, vacant look and voice. The two laughed and sat in a quiet, comfortable silence. Regel? Yeah? If you don't mind me asking, why do you follow God? She asked innocently. What do you mean? Regel said, his relaxed posture subtly tense. I mean, never mind. She looked away. Lilith, it's fine. You can talk to me. I won't be offended by what you say, he said, and for some reason this situation felt familiar. It's just you are really kind, she said, as if struggling to express what she wanted to say. God is supposed to be kind and loving, yet his punishment can be too cruel. Lilith looked at Regel to see his reaction. She seemed to look deep into him, and saw he was calmly listening before continuing. Allows cruel things to happen. Why do you follow him? Regel leaned back, took a deep breath, and looked to the sky. For a long while, he stayed quiet, thinking deeply on her question. Do you know what the children of lesser gods are called? Lilith suddenly asked, cutting of Regel's thoughts. Yeah, demigods. Demigods, Lilith said with a huff. Partial gods. Half gods. All of us are the children of God. Yet humans are just human. She looked at Regel with a deep look. Do you know why that is? Regel shook his head. Lilith tilted her head at his reaction. You're an odd angel, Regel, she said with a chuckle, to which the Archangel raised an eyebrow. Because after Adam and I, he made them lesser. Lilith raised her hand, called up her magic, and made a fireball. Then it turned to wind, then earth, then ice. Then the magic itself changed to that of fey magic, angel magic, and even devil magic, before settling on a sphere made of shadow. He feared making something like me or Adam again. So he made them all weak, and slow to grow. She stared intently at the Archangel. How is that fair, Regel? The question hung in the air, like a blade. Regel looked to the sky again, and thought for a moment. Makes sense, eh? The answer was so surprising Lilith's magic dispersed. Waha, those who are born with strength tend to not realize its value. Those who are born weak, but grow strong, understand its importance, and the weight of responsibility to having power. You are seriously weird, she cried out. I'm not that weird, Regel said back, offended. No, you really are. Lilith spoke with wide eyes in astonishment. Angels don't just think about God's actions and form an opinion. They just accept it as it is. Unless you're Azazel, and well, angels can't lie, you're a boy, so obviously you're not. Seriously, what kind of angel are you? An archangel. Wait, what? Regel laughed, and Lilith kept demanding he explains himself, yet he didn't. Eventually the two went to sleep, with Lilith annoyed at Regel pulling the mysterious act card, and slept facing away from him. After a while, due to the chilly air, she scooted close, till she slept next to the Archangel. Before she fell asleep, she felt his wing cover her. The next day, Vivian had returned to rejoin the first woman and Archangel on the trip. They had finally reached one of the many towns in Hoy, a south isle of Orkney. We should be able to find it here soon, Lilith said. The trio started looking around for the container of the beast, wondering how it could be in such a small town as this. While looking around, Regel found his eyes browsing one of the many shops he saw around. Regel? Vivian looked back to the Archangel confusion. Regel? Lilith asked as well, to which the fairy turned to her with a frown on her face, before facing her fiancé again. Here, I got you two something. Regel handed Vivian a sword, and Lilith a storybook. This blade is completely ordinary. Vivian commented neutrally. Yeah, but it has a beautiful design, I figured you might like it. Regel said, very well. I like it. She said the last part under a glamour. And my book? Asked Lilith, holding it up, like a cat demanding attention. Well, since you were held for too long, I thought you would like to read about the world and what humans have been doing, in an entertaining form. Regel explained. That's Lilith said, her smile noticeably more genuine than what Vivian or Regel had seen before. Thank you, I really appreciate it. Okay, how about we get back to the search? Regel snapped his head looking away, having noticed a presence heading in their direction. An angelic presence. Regel ran. Vivian and Lilith followed. They went through the forest near town for a bit, before stumbling into a clearing to find Michael resting there. Regel, what are you doing here? Michael looked on in disbelief. Michael, what are you doing here? Regel asked with the same look. I'm trying to find a place to hide, and meet up with Raziel later on. What about you? Asked Michael. I'm in kind of a scavenger hunt. Regel tried to explain. Regel's companions entered the clearing. Well, you know Vivian, and the other is the reason why we're here. We're looking for a container the devils want to unleash hell on earth with. You wouldn't believe who it is, Regel said, and Michael's eyes widened as he saw the person. Guess who's no longer in hell and free from Lucifer's? Regel. Run away from her right now! Michael shouted in terror and panic. Regel blinked in confusion. In an instant a light spear as tall as a house was thrown at the first woman. TSK, such a shame. A spear made by the power of the leader of Archangels was stopped by a single hand. I was having so much fun playing the rescued damsel, Lilith said with a smile, one that Regel's mind connected to her expression hidden by the campfire's shadows the day before. Lilith closed her hand and crushed the light spear into pieces. You dash! Vivian summoned her magic, only for magic chains to sudden appear wrapping her in seals shining black that seemed so familiar to Regel. Before he noticed, Lilith had dashed to Michael and buried her fist in his stomach. Too late! Michael had thrown something in Regel's direction, his other hand firing a holy spell into the sky. The darkening evening sky light up with sphere of light vibrating wave after wave across the land. It was a message that all angels understood. An emergency beacon calling for all archangels to arrive. It was without words, yet the meaning was transmitted all the same. Lilith is on Earth. What? Why? Regel looked up to see the object Michael threw at him. He caught it. It was a box. A box with a very familiar presence inside it. Regel. He looked up to see Lilith staring at him with a calm smile, her tones sinister. Behind her the Archangel Michael was chained up in the same black seals as Vivian. Please hand over the box. I don't wish to fight you, Regel. Michael struggled to shout. Lilith sighed in annoyance. It's useless telling him to run. I'm not gonna let him, you know. Reverse salvation. Michael shouted. What? Lilith turned her head to look at Michael in confusion. Regel understood. In that moment Lilith was distracted. Regel called on his holy power, mentally made the formula to the salvation spell, then reversed it, and connected to Michael's spell in the sky, that he could now see could act as a beacon and a summoning point. Wait! Lilith turned back, eyes widened in surprise. The light sphere burst, its brightness overtaking everything. Regel ran toward where Vivian was. When the light dispersed, the rest of the 10 seraphs were present. Lilith sighed in disappointment. This could have all ended without the noise. A wicked grin spread across her face. Oh well. Regel reached Vivian and broke the magic around the poorly held flask, making water fall to the ground. Vivian stayed in place. I haven't had fun in millennia. Lilith spread her arms wide, in an inviting provocation to the archangels. Your evil will not be allowed to continue, mother of devils. Sariel shouted. No more, not after today. I would like to see you try. Lilith grinned and her power surged and condensed in her core. The archangels attacked. Behemoth wasteland. Lilith's aura exploded in a radius that expanded quickly till it covered the island they were on. The land turned black. The world seemed darker, and the light from heaven dimmed till it couldn't be felt by the archangels. In the palace of the Greek love goddess, could be heard as two bodies danced with ecstasy. As Ares pumped his hips up one last time, he grunted in climax. As Aphrodite cried out and joined him with her own, Aphrodite let herself fall on the war god and rest her head on her chest. You should have attacked the biblical gods, believers. You wouldn't have suffered that shameful defeat against that useless plump of an archangel. Aphrodite hissed in annoyance and bitterness. This again. Ares grunted, resting his head on one arm, and holding his lover with the other. Like I told Zeus and all of you in the meeting afterwards, that entire plan was asinine. Attacking worshippers in their church? Actually killing the mortals and eating their souls? Everything about that plan was despicable and dishonorable, and if it hadn't been Zeus ordering it, I would never have went along with it. Ares growled in restrained anger. He should have never listened to that lying serpent. Trying to regain influence and worshippers with those means would have never worked. Aphrodite narrowed her eyes as she looked at him. Does that mean you acted pompous and took your time in killing the mortals, all to draw the archangel's response to you? Yes. Ares cried out. Fighting mortals, especially hapless one without a warrior's spirit in their bodies, was disgusting. Even if it had been in a consecrated ground weakening me, and against an empowered and enraged archangel, it was far better than what Zeus and that Lucifer originally planned. That fight, at least, had some measure of honor. Honor? Aphrodite shouted as she sat up on Ares. Who gives a worth about honor? You're the god of war. War is inherently ugly and merciless. I distinctly remember you stating otherwise to my face multiple times. Ares said with a smirk, as he placed both hands behind his head. Shut up. Aphrodite said bitingly, but couldn't help the amused huff that escaped her. And just because war is merciless, doesn't mean it couldn't have rules, boundaries that must be placed. Warriors should fight and welcome death. Peasants should be left to live but accept the might of those stronger. Ares spoke with calm and firm belief, fighting using any and all means to win, fighting with brutal tactics that care for no belief or reason, like Athena, would just make the world a chaotic hell. Her eyes narrowed in irritation once more. So that's it? You're putting down your sword in this fight? She asked, a hidden threat in her voice. Ares ignored it. His lover tended to get angry and storm off multiple times, before returning in the end. I'm the god of war, he chuckled. There will be many other fights for me to pick up the blade again. Thankfully Zeus wizened up and pulled back from all-out war with heaven. We are not prepared yet. I see Aphrodite closed her eyes as she came to a decision. Do you want to know something, Ares? What? He raised an eyebrow. When I'm with you, it's always fun. Almost all the way through. Aphrodite said. Almost? Ares chuckled, as he rose in both meanings to the challenge. Toward the very end, you always disappoint. Aphrodite raised her hands up, and a demonic morning star appeared between them. Ares only had time to look shocked, before the spiked weapons slammed into his face, caving it in. His godly power nullified in that first strike, and when it returned by the second, Aphrodite was adding her own strength, her own divine power to the morning star, feeding and empowering it. Did you know? Slam. Blood spattered. I was once in charge of war. Slam. Blood spattered. I was not only beautiful but terrible. Slam. Blood spattered. But then Hera was afraid for her little throne. Slam. Blood and bones spattered, and took a part of me, using it to make a child with her and Zeus. Slam. Blood and bones spattered. It was you. I seeked you out not because you were strong, brutish, skillful, or any of that nonsense. I just wanted to feel whole if for a little while. Slam. Blood, bones, and brain matter spattered. Then Hera again bound me further, forcing me into a marriage I didn't want with her ugly imp, because she feared my beauty would take everything from her anyways. Slam. Blood, bones, and brain matter spattered. I had to accept it. I had to accept this torture, but no more. Slam. Blood, bones, and brain matter spattered. I'm taking my fate in my own hands right here. Right now. Slam. The demonic morning star glowed and chimed as Ares died. With the god's death, the weapon's second function activated, and it plundered his power, authority, and essence. The beautiful Aphrodite was no more. As she stood up and walked out of the room, she was Aphrodite Aria. My lady, we heard. The renewed war goddess looked to her nymphs and maidens that attended to her. She felt hungry. Send word to Sister. Aphrodite Aria looked up to see a hasting Athena enter her palace, only to freeze in shock as she took in the war goddess's presence. You actually went through with it? Athena asked in disbelief and not a little disgust. Send word to the Satan Lucifer. I will ally with his forces at Britannia. Aphrodite Aria spoke, ignoring the other war goddess, before staring her down. I will take back my rightful place in this world, and none will stop me or stand in my way. She looked at the malbranche in her hand, watching as it pulsed with new power. It bonded to her to the point of starting to fuse with her hand, even developing veins linking to her body. Let's see what else I can do with you, Farfarello. She thought at the weapon, and got a hum of curious approval. The war goddess huffed at the haughty weapon's reaction. Aphrodite Aria walked forward, not bothering to acknowledge Athena any longer. Finally! Time for war. She grinned with blood soaking her face in anticipation. Sephiroth, a power that lies within all angels. 10 spheres that represented of God's being and his manifestation into all that is. A map for the soul's ascension. These spheres of power are expressed most within his archangels. In response, Lilith had created the Qliphoth and embedded it within every devil, an inversion of God's manifestations and a rejection of his being. The shell of Nehemoth was the first rejection. The denial of his light. Brother, what is this? Asked Sandalphon, staring at his hands, searching deep in his own soul to find God's light, yet all he could feel was his own self. Alone. Calm down, Sandalphon, said Metatron, yet his hands couldn't stop shaking. This is just a trick. The black chains erupted the shadows under their wings, grabbing every archangel in the sky and slamming them into ground. The only one who was coherent enough to focus was Raziel, and she was captured all the same. Craters were made from their violent impacts. Brothers! Michael shouted in worry for his siblings. The pain was minimal, yet it forced the archangels to feel the world without the light of heaven that always there for them. Ailments that they once ignored were now noticeable, and the black chains seemed to actively worsening any weak condition within them even more. Yeah, that's all about what I expected from Daddy's boys and girls. Remove his light for a bit, and you all break down, Lilith said with a mock sorrowful tone. Although I do give credit to Raziel for at least not being in catatonic mess right away, she said, to which the Archangel of Mysteries glared. The archangels forced themselves to snap out of their panic and shock, understanding the danger of situation, and mentally chastised themselves for thinking that they could have ever broke their father's commands, or let go of his light. So what? Michael spoke, getting her attention on him. You kill us? These chains aren't enough, we'll break out eventually, and if you do manage to kill us, all you'll do is call Father here right away, for him to smite you, which? Spat out Gabriel, far behind the first woman. One archangel, like his older sister before him, shrugged off the effect of the Nehemoth wasteland so he could act. So without Father's light, I no longer feel his ever-present love. All I feel is just me. All I feel is just human. But what the is wrong with that? Regel didn't spend time hesitating, he just moved, holding the box with one wing, while analyzing the black seals, and working to break them on Vivian. Our rag Vivian tried to speak through the pain, but all that came out was a raspy whisper. Shush. I'm going to break you out of these. He whispered back. There's water under your feet. The moment you're free, get out of here, and go back to the cottage. Not without you. She hissed back. Vivian, begging you, not now. Not in this situation. I can't focus on the battle, if I know you'll be harmed. Regel said in a hushed hurry. He knew what the black seals reminded him of. The seals upon the beast. Albeit an inferior copy and an evil version of God's seals, if that made sense. Not leaving you, Vivian said back. Ah, yes, Lilith said to Gabriel's threat. Can't have the guest of honor arriving too quickly. Not before we prepare the surprise. Lilith let out a relaxed sigh, as she lied without worry. The archangels would no longer be able to tell. What? Another assassination attempt? Those pitiful efforts have never bared fruit," said Raphael, the warmth of his voice gone. "True, but no. I would never want to do something that redundant. Sodom and Gomorrah," Lilith sighed in sorrowful and longing wistful memory, "taught me the direct approach won't work." She grinned, her wide stretching wider than a human's should. "That's why. Something that requires a more subtle touch is needed." "This is subtle?" Raziel raised an eyebrow. "Given how this war has been going so far?" "Yes, actually," Lilith said with a pep in her step. "Ah, right before anything, 1, 2, 3, 4, 9. Ah. Right, where's my cute little guy?" Lilith jumped and moved in a cheerful, bubbly manner, as she turned around expecting the weakest archangel to be writhing on the ground, unable to move from the shock of being disconnected from heaven. "Oh, Reg!" With a loud sound of glass breaking, the black seals on Vivian broke. "What?" Lilith's eyes widened in utter surprise. "Go!" Michael shouted and pushed against his chains. "Chakma incandescence!" With a deep shout, Uriel's heavenly flames expanded uniformly out of him, burning the chains to nothing, and doing the same for his siblings. Uriel burst forward with a punch. Lilith instantly threw away her shock, and exploded her magical aura from her body. Uriel's charge cut through the aura, but Lilith's magic responses to her will without any need for discipline or control. Chains exploded from all shadows, and a spherical barrier erupted around the first woman. The flame of God's fist slammed into a barrier, pushing it and Lilith back a few inches. His fires burned away the rest of her aura that wasn't given solid shape. The barrier had a crack in it. Yet Uriel was still stopped. The chains had attacked the other archangels, yet they were ready for it this time, and fend them off, sending waves of light spears to support their brother. Holy! How long have I been asleep that the most clingy children in heaven learned some independence? Lilith said, astonished at Uriel's use of his Sephiroth. For Father and his will, we'll do what we must. Face any challenge we must. Even our own selves. Uriel growled out, and brought his other hand to try and break the barrier. Of course, it's the muscle head that's first to figure it out. Lilith sighed before putting one hand up to strengthen the barrier, and another pointed at the escaping Vivian and Regel. Nope. Black chains exploded from the fairy and the youngest archangel's shadow, only for Michael's spear to slam into them, breaking the magical chains apart. "Run! Both of you!" Michael shouted. However, the purpose of the attack was fulfilled. Pandora's box was pulled from Regel's arm. "I won't let you!" Regel sent out his feathers to teleport the box to him. The box hummed and the spell failed, so Regel teleported himself to the box. Vivian jumped into the water, sending herself back to her home. Regel grabbed the box, yet the chains closed in on him. He tried to use salvation. Thus far, he was lucky that the reverse salvation only used a third of his reserves, as Michael's beacon spell had the energy covered. The spell was even still working in the sky. Yet every spell he used afterward, and unlocking Lilith's black seals has taken more and more out of him. There was still one option left. Even if it will cost him greatly, he could take the box to heaven if he used his own life force for the salvation spell. Regel knows not all angels get revived. Those who fight in the first heaven are within God's domain, thus are safe. Will he die before reaching heaven, or upon reaching it? He didn't know, but it was a chance he had to take. Yet the choice was taken from his hands. "Archangel Regel, I call upon your debt to me. Appear at my side now." Vivian's voice rang out in the battlefield. The box pulsed, tampering with other magical effect around it. Regel disappeared. Pandora's box stayed. It haved so many questions. Lilith said as her barrier was about to break. "But I suppose first things first." The archangels readied their attack, as the barrier was on its last leg. The moment Uriel destroys it, would be the moment they strike down Lilith for good. Lilith Gate. Waves of magical energy exploded from the first woman, and every drop of magic was a devil summoning spell. Thousands of devils burst out from Lilith's energy, as they found themselves called from the underworld without thought or reason. They couldn't even refuse. Their bodies obeyed the command, overriding any will they had. Some answered without care, some gleeful at the chance for violence, and some watched in horror as their body moved without their input. "Hello, hello, hello, brothers!" And from the waves of dark magic Lucifer burst forth, standing by his bride. Did you all miss me? If we never see you again, it would be too soon. Sariel said as the archangels flew and regrouped again. Ouch, your words hurt, little prince. Right here. The Satan pointed at his heart. Sariel sneered. So this battle again. Michael said, standing in front of the archangels ready to lead the charge. What can I say? The war was getting boring, and I wanted to try reliving that first fight again. Lucifer spread his arms dramatically. Hello, did your gambit with the Olympians work? Lilith asked, as she leaned into her husband's side. Lucifer stilled and looked toward his wife in wide-eyed surprise. You're awake? Indeed I am. Lilith grinned. Shit, he looked back to the seraph, reasserting their threat. Did they actually push you hard enough for you to wake yourself up? No, that's from something else, beloved, she said with excitement. It was actually not important, Lucifer said dismissively. After all, the really party is about to start now, he said with a grin. Lilith pouted, but understood they had bigger issues to focus on, like the spear of light made from Sariel, Sandalphon, and Metatron, and powered by Michael, Judgment Lance. They all shouted as a spear tall enough to reach the cloud, and wide as a castle descended on the damned couple. Whoa, now! That's not just unfair but rude, Lucifer whined. Have no fear, Helo. Lilith raised her hand, and hundreds of the devils around her shouted in screams or agony, before breaking down to concentrated shards of pure demonic power. Lilith gathered up the shards, Lucifer empowered her, and together they made a barrier that stopped the heavenly smite, then began to infect the holy energy with, corrupt, break it and absorb it. Soon enough the angelic attack was gone, and the hell duo were left unscathed with a hide hole in their devil army. You know something, Michael? Lucifer began. Enlighten me. Michael said with slow spite. Despite that attack, I am actually gonna be the better man in this case. Lucifer grinned. The worms that crawl on the earth are of better character than you. Gabriel said coldly. Again, words hurt. But since this fight seems hardly fair for your side, I'm gonna let you even out the numbers. Lucifer pointed up. Michael and Raziel alone looked up, while the others focused on the Satan. The beacon spell he cast in the beginning was still ongoing. No. Michael whispered in horror. Cancel it. Raziel shouted as she understood what's about to happen. I can't. Michael shouted as he tried to stop the spell, even attacking it, but the Nehemoth effect made Michael's light weaker the further it got away from him. Lilith had left beacon spell alone, making the Nehemoth effect not touch it. However, due to heaven's light constantly trying to reconnect to the archangels, it sought out Michael's energy and empowered the spell, keeping it active long after its purpose was served. Yes, Lilith hissed in joy. What's the matter, Michael? I'm just letting the heavenly host have the chance to fight together. I even pulled back the attack on heaven to give them a break and join us for this little reunion. Lucifer offered helpfully. I even brought a guest. A divine magic circle appeared in the sky, and from it Aphrodite Aria stepped out. Greetings, little birdies. Angels began arriving. Nehemoth wasteland darkened their links to heaven's light. Hundreds of thousands of angels began dropping from the sky in terror and shock. Have no worries, children, Aphrodite Aria shouted as she spread her arms out, her voice reaching all corners of the isle they were on. Even if your heavenly Father abandons you, even if you left out all alone, no matter who you are, come to me. Worship me, and I will love you. Her authority of love shined, and the angels of heaven began to fall. Thanks for watching this video. If you really enjoy this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. Don't forget to support and follow the Silver W King for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. If you like to hear adult version of this and other stories, I'll give you link of my Patreon. See you in the next video. Goodbye.